Let the record show that Vice Mayor Dawson and council members Kwok and Kendall and Mayor and jury are present. Council member Geringer will be about 1 hour late. So we'll note her arrival when she gets here. We don't need item 3 to have a motion for adoption of the agenda.
I'll move to adopt the agenda.
A second.
Okay, a motion by Vice Mayor Dawson, seconded by Councilmember Kendall. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous with 1 absence. We're on to public comments for the closed session items. If there is anyone who'd like to comment on an item on the closed session, now is the time. There's nobody, no public here. Is there anyone online?
Any member of the public would like to speak on a closed session item, please raise your hand now. There's no one raising their hand, Mayor Endry.
Okay, so we will go into closed session, but I will defer to Vice Mayor Dawson.
I will recuse myself from the closed session because I'm party to the litigation.
All right, we'll return at 7 o'clock.
Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing. Okay.
Okay, at 7:05, we're back in open session. Councilmember Geringer joined us at the beginning of the closed session, so we had 4 council members present. There is no reportable action from the closed session. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, welcome to our third in-person council meeting. This will be a hybrid meeting. That is, as a courtesy, members of the public may participate remotely. As we move through the agenda, everyone will have the opportunity to address the council. If you're here in the room, please fill out a speaker slip and indicate which item you wish to comment on. The city clerk will call on you to speak in the order you turned in your speaker slip. If you're participating remotely, when we get to the item you wish to comment on, please use the raise hand feature and the city clerk will recognize you. Public comments from remote participants on Zoom will be audio only. This means members of the public wishing to address the council will be allowed to speak live. However, their video will not be shown and screen sharing will not be an option. Finally, since the city cannot guarantee that the public's access to teleconferencing technology will be uninterrupted, and the option for the public to participate remotely is a courtesy, if technical difficulties arise for participants using the Zoom option, the meeting will continue unless required otherwise by the Brown Act. So we're on to item 8, public comments for items that are not on this evening's agenda. Is there anyone who would like to address the council on an item not on the agenda?
Mayor Anduri, I have speaker slips. Your first speaker is John Fitzgerald. If you will come to the podium and speak into the microphone, make sure the green light is on at the microphone, please. Push the button if it's not. Green light.
Nope,
Oh, that must,
We heard you.
nothing was on.
that's pretty effective.
All right.
Welcome, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Hello there, John Fitzgerald here. I'd like to have this entered in the public record too, please, if I may. So this is addressing Scott Dulesky, who I think all of you are probably familiar with. He was framed 17 years ago. We have an immense amount of information in here. Exculpatory evidence that was never allowed in the court trial. This is Ralph Hernandez, a detective working on the case. He's been doing so for about 12 years, Ralph? 12 years you've been on the case? Anyway, the last 10 years, he's been doing this pro bono because he knows in his heart that Scott was framed. The actual murderer or murderers are still walking around Lafayette. One of them was married to the woman who was murdered. He's married with 2 kids. He's living the life of Riley. None of this information was actually entered in the court record. None of it. 3 separate tracking dogs, which nobody found out about in the news because they didn't report this. 3 separate canine units tracked to a trailer that was on the Horowitz-Vital property. They wouldn't track towards Scott's house, even though they said Scott had gone to his house on this trail. The dog stopped and went back to this trailer. Inside the trailer, they found pinkish red water soaking in the sink. On those clothes, they found a picture of Pamela Vitale, the murdered woman, on top of the pictures of the clothes soaking. The clothes soaking there was blood. This is just one of many things that weren't reported. Mr. Horowitz said that his wife fought valiantly with that monster who killed her, and they found his DNA underneath her fingernails. That was an absolute abject lie. There was no DNA found of Scott in the home, anywhere around the home. Even the shoe print they reported that was on top of a plastic container inside the house. It was admitted it wasn't Scott's shoe, but the public never heard that because the news never reported that. His mother died with a broken heart about 5 years ago, fighting tooth and nail, along with two very good attorneys who were basically laughed at. Ralph spent, as I said, all these years trying to do something about it, and he's still doing something about it, and I'm working with him now. I have children. I'm sure many of you have children or grandchildren. This is an atrocity, a total miscarriage of justice, and the DA's office isn't doing a damn thing. I ask all of you to take a look at this report, call Mr. Hernandez, call Ralph, get the goods on this, and help us get this young man out of prison. He's been there 17 years. It's about time people get off their fannies and do something. And I'm sickened and saddened to hear when I offer these to certain people here in this room. I won't mention names. I'm not interested in this. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? Okay, thank you.
Your next speaker is Ralph Hernandez.
Good evening. My name is Ralph Hernandez. I have over 50 years of investigative experience in public safety matters. I am considered one of the prime experts in homicides and many other investigations. I have worked for over 20 different law firms. I am a retired peace officer. I spent over 33 years as a sworn peace officer. Yes, I was asked to investigate the Scott Dulesky prosecution in November of 2011, 6 years after Scott Dulesky was wrongly arrested, accused, and prosecuted. Scott Dulesky did not murder Pamela Vitale in your city in Lafayette. Somebody else did. I looked at over 600 photographs that were taken by law enforcement. I've analyzed all of those. I've gone through a lot of the reports. Scott Dulesky did not do it. They chose him out of the air just because he was a resident, a poor white male juvenile. There is a lot of information, a lot of evidence that was completely ignored by your Lafayette police officers. Actually, there's some real questionable statements that were made in the search warrants and that were transferred over to the prosecution case. The investigators, numerous investigators, they basically did not come out and say what they found to the court. The court was unaware. The jury was unaware. It would have exonerated Scott Dulesky. You had 3 different police tracking dogs that went to another renter's place, and there was bloody clothes there. There was information and evidence that should have been used but was not by your Lafayette officers, as well as the district attorney's office. You had also lie detector tests that were given to that individual, that renter. It showed that he was dishonest. He was not honest. But Lafayette officers, they disregarded him. They just dropped him once they focused on this poor teenage kid. What you, as a city council, elected officials, and I was an elected official myself in Antioch on the city council, as was my wife, you know, you have a responsibility. Your responsibility is get that kid a new trial, a new investigation. He did not do it. There are others that I've focused on that did in fact do it. So I'm open to questions from you. My sheet here, which I want entered into the record, my sheet here, you should have a copy of. I've pretty well briefed it. My actual investigation reports are well over 60 pages, plus a lot of evidence. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hernandez? Nope. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, go ahead.
So you're asking our council to open up a new trial for Scott. I'm just making very clear what you're asking for.
Actually, what I'm asking you to do is have your current investigators look at the case again, as well as you as representatives of your community to ask the district attorney's office to go ahead and reopen the investigation. They did a lousy job prosecuting this kid.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
I actually have a question, and I meant to ask it before. So I understand your role and as an investigator over the last 12 years. Mr. Fitzgerald, what is your,
I'm sorry, say that again?
I understand Mr. Hernandez, your role, as the private investigator and your background. I didn't ask, but meant to ask what Mr. Fitzgerald's.
He's a very concerned citizen who took an interest in the case because it's really heartbreaking if you know all the details of what this kid in state prison has gone through. And, I say this to you, I have worked for over 20 different law offices in my 19 years as a private investigator. It goes as far also as to Australia for a law firm in Australia. Some law firms in Beverly Hills. I worked for Willie Brown Jr. I worked for the John Burris Law Office. I worked for the chief deputy of the San Francisco District Attorney's Office who went to private practice. I know what I'm talking about. You have a kid in prison that you can help get justice for, as well as for your community.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
May I just say one thing?
No, I'm sorry. No, sorry.
Okay.
He answered the question, so we're fine.
Okay.
We
Well,
have to
I'm
be
sorry,
fair
did
to
that
all the
answer your
speakers, so
question?
we'll be limiting to 3 minutes and each
Ms.
of you went
Geringer,
over.
that more or less.
So
answered
thank you
your
very much.
question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Mayor Anduri and council, Janet Thomas and Lynn McMichael is ceding her 3 minutes. So if Janet needs it, she has 6 minutes.
Thank you. Well, I have to admit, I'm a bit shaken up. I knew Scott at Akalani's. I taught when he was there. So. I'm Janet Thomas. Nice to see you all tonight. And I'm here with my friend Lynn McMichael, who is ceding her 3 minutes. We're here as both board members of the Lafayette Hillside Memorial to give you an update on the memorial. As you all know, in 2003, 15 symbols, crosses were put on the hill by Jeff Heaton with the permission of Louise and Johnson Clark, who owned the land. And in 2006, about 3 years later, 300 were installed through the Mount Diablo Peace and Justice Center and La Miranda Peace Group. I was part of that effort. And over the next year, about 2,000 more were installed. That number was increased over the years. The goal was not to forget and to honor, obviously, the service of those who fought and the losses there, but also to reflect on the unintended consequences of war. Since then, a sign was installed that updated the number of servicemen known killed in Iraq and Afghanistan, and vigils every Veterans Day and Memorial Day since then have been held. A group of about 10 people, this group changed some over the years, has organized the vigils, paid annually to have the hillside weed whacked, held painting and installation parties to keep the symbols standing in as good a fashion as possible. A few years ago, the group of us who were maintaining the hillside formed a nonprofit, Lafayette Hillside Memorial. This board took responsibility for the site and gave the Clark family or subsequent owner the possibility of gifting the land as a charitable contribution, and also the option for private funds for enhancement maybe to be gifted as charitable contributions. It's one of the reasons we became a 501c3. Louise and Johnson Clark have passed away, and in conversation a few weeks ago with Charles Clark, the trustee, we've learned that he's about to put the land up for sale. He has no intention of donating the land. So we're here tonight to inform, on behalf of the board, to inform the city council and the community that we will have a Memorial Day vigil, as always, which may be our last on May 29th at 5:30. All are invited. And we, the board, had a community workshop about the future of the memorial to get community input. We knew that some changes were in the offing in February, and we're going to have a follow-up meeting on May 11th to answer questions and open the conversation to community members who you might have an idea they'd like to pursue. That's going to be a Zoom meeting, and there will be information on the website, www.LafayetteHillsideMemorial.org, if anyone is interested in attending that. And I just want to tell the city and the community that if the symbols come down, we're committed to doing so in a very solemn, respectful way. And that people who've personalized the symbol will be able to take those home, keep them. We'll invite the community to join in those efforts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions for Ms. Thomas?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mayor Anduri, there are no more speaker slips and there are no hands raised for our Zoom attendees. So your public comment period is over.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to item 9A, our presentation on Lafayette history as part of our celebration of 175 plus years of Lafayette history. So we welcome Mary McCosker, President of the Lafayette Historical Society, for installment 4.
Thank you very much. We're just going to move ahead in history a little bit tonight. And our topic is the early downtown. Elam and Margaret Brown purchased the Rancho Acalanes in 1847 and sold over time some of the 3,300 acres to families who had accompanied them on the journey west, and then other people who moved into the area later. As the community was at the junction of the road to the Redwoods, which is Moraga, the road to Martinez, and the road to Oakland, it was a desirable location in which to settle. As the town population began to increase, stores and other businesses were established. In 1864, Elam and Margaret donated land in the center of the community so there would be a small park for gathering people together on weekends and holidays. And most of the very early businesses were built around this park. It is named the Elam and Margaret Allen Brown Plaza Park, but usually referred to as Plaza Park. It is the center of town and still a place for town gatherings today. This photo shows what downtown Lafayette looked like in the early 1900s. You can see the Giles building on the far left, where two sisters had a shop where they made clothing. The Pioneer grocery store, the small Stark's meat market, the Lamp Hotel, and Peter Thompson's blacksmith shop. Early businesses were built around the Plaza Park. The Wayside Inn was a hotel where one could spend the night. There was also a cook who could make meals for diners who might be traveling through town. The Wayside Inn is still near the plaza, but today is a thrift shop. The first grocery store in town was built by Benjamin Shreve, the man who named our town Lafayette. He came to California during the gold rush and was traveling to San Francisco, perhaps to return to the Midwest, when he came through this small community. Elam Brown hired him to be the first school teacher. He taught school for about a year and then built the first grocery store, which he operated until 1887. Here's the inside of the store, what it looked like, a little different from Whole Foods and Diablo Foods. Fresh produce and dry goods were sold in this store, as well as canned goods and other items. Later, the store was called the Pioneer Store, and today the same building is the site of Sideboard Restaurant. We have a really good history of recycling our buildings. This small building was a meat market. Before the town had electricity, there was no way to refrigerate meat to keep it fresh. If you wanted to buy meat, you would speak to the butcher in the meat market, and he would have fresh meat for you when you needed it. This is the Daly family who owned the meat market. A photographer came to town in a wagon and set up a set outside, actually, probably hanging rope between trees and then putting this backdrop up. If you look at the floor, what looks like the floor, I think it's some kind of tarps or something on the ground, because it certainly doesn't look very level. So the photographer came to town and took pictures of many of the Lafayette families. It's interesting to see what these people would wear when they're dressed up compared to what we might wear today. And thank goodness that women don't have to wear corsets any longer. There was a big snowstorm in January of 1922. Many pictures were taken then because it was such an unusual occurrence. This is a photo of the meat market, then located in the Wayside Inn building, with the delivery truck in the front of the store. The Lamp Hotel was located at the corner of today's Mount Diablo Boulevard and Moraga Road. Philip Lamp built this hotel in 1900. It served the community until 1925, when a cook left a pan of food on the wood range, starting a fire. The townspeople fought to save the business section around the plaza. The Walnut Creek Fire Department saved the town using water from Pat Meadows' swimming hole down behind today's Park Theater, but the hotel was destroyed. Peter Thompson, the man on the right, was the town blacksmith for over 60 years. He came to California from Canada in 1859. As there were no hardware stores in Lafayette at this time, Peter would put horseshoes on the feet of horses, make metal tools for farmers, as well as square nails that were used when building with wood. 2 of his anvils are in the history room at the library today. His blacksmith shop was located across the street from the Plaza Park, where Bank of America is located today. Located near the Lafayette Library, the first schoolhouse was a small one-room building, probably built in the mid-1850s, and it served the community until the late 1860s. This is what Mount Diablo Boulevard looked like in the 1860s. Notice that there are no buildings on either side of the road, nor any trees or plants for that matter. The road was a dirt road that became very muddy when it rained, making it difficult for wagons to use the road. If a road had too many ruts due to the rain and wagon traffic, the fence along the road might be moved back to create a passable flat road. The small town of Lafayette is seen in the background. This is Moraga Road in 1915, looking up towards where Mount Diablo Boulevard would be today. The third schoolhouse, which is now the Methodist Church, can be seen in the distance on the left. This is the corner of Mount Diablo Boulevard and Moraga Road in the 1930s. If you turned left there by the Associated gas station, that would be Moraga Road heading down towards Town Hall. If you turned right, you would be going into the Safeway parking lot. I noticed that the road has only 2 lanes and there are no stop signs or stoplights. The first post office in Lafayette was located in the general store, in Benjamin Shreve's store. Later, when the town had more people, this small post office was built where Safeway parking lot is today. The woman on the left is Carrie Van Meter, the postmaster. She had 60 books in the post office, so this building served as a library as well. Town Hall was built in 1914 to be a place for community meetings and parties. Upstairs, there was a dance floor that bounced when people danced. Partygoers would take the train from Walnut Creek or Oakland, and sometimes the dances wouldn't be over until 3 in the morning. Today, Town Hall is a theater where plays are presented and where children take drama classes. The Lafayette Cemetery is on the west end of Lafayette. It was established as a cemetery in 1874, although the first burial there was in 1854, and many early settlers are buried in this cemetery. And then we have a drawing that Chris Schreiber used to be the superintendent at the cemetery, and her husband Homer made this map. He drew this map of what Lafayette looked like. So if you get a little idea of where some of those things were located. So I'll let you look for a few minutes if you want. Looks fairly rural. Anyway, thank you again for the opportunity, and I'll see you next month with something else.
All right, thank you very much. But before you leave, are there any questions? Councilmember Garinger?
Well, I don't have a question. I want to thank Mary for her presentations every month, but may I have a point of personal privilege? At the last meeting, I did announce, but Mary wasn't here, and I know she really loves to be called out for things like winning the
Yes. Yes.
which for those of you listening in, of course, she does not want me to do this, but I do want to have us congratulate you, Mary, on your being the recipient of the Tom Mulvaney Legacy Award. I did actually attend the gala, and when your picture went up on the screen, many of the very young people there, were very excited to see, it wasn't me, but very excited to see Mrs. McCosker up on the screen, and everybody. I personally know I've gotten to work with you a lot on a lot of education issues. You teach history, the same thing that you're teaching to us, to hundreds, probably maybe some of those people, but hundreds and thousands of students. And I just can't think of anybody more deserving of the Tom Mulvaney Legacy Award from Alpi. So thank you.
Okay, but are there any other questions from the council? Any questions from the public? All right, so it's May 8th. Mark your calendars. Installment 5 is May 8th. Okay, thank you very much. All right, we're on to 9B. Chief Peter, welcome. And thank you for providing your information in advance. There we go.
All right. Move this here a second. Okay, good evening, Mayor Anduri and Council. My name is Jeff Peter. I'm one of the assistant fire chiefs at Contra Costa Fire, your fire department. I'm actually in charge of the communications division, which is the regional communications center and the IT shop, and also the radio shop. But I'm pleased to be here tonight to present on behalf of our fire district and Fire Chief Louis Brochard. And I've got about 10 different slides to go over and give you an update on the fire district. And we'll talk a little bit about wildland fire concerns and threats and what the public can do most importantly. And we have some data to cover as well with you. Okay, so the Contra Costa County Fire Protection District does continue to grow. We are a countywide all-risk fire department. It isn't just structure fires or medical calls anymore. It's technical rescues. And we provide the ambulance service for pretty much the entire county, including the city of Richmond, everybody but San Ramon Valley Fire Protection District. We are one of the largest special fire districts in California. We're dedicated to obviously preserving life and property and the environment. This is the latest district map. All of the red numbered icons on the map are actually Contra Costa County Fire Protection stations. I'll speak a little bit about two stations we're going to build out east with our East Contra Costa consolidation. That's station 90 and 94 in green. And then I'll speak about station 73 and 74 out in the city of Pinal. Oops. Going back one. Okay, so again, the district is comprised of 500 plus employees. We now have 34 fire stations and 37 different crews. Those are some of our dual house stations that have a truck company in them. We've got a fleet of over 250 fire apparatus, staff vehicles, specialty vehicles. Many are reserves, but most of that fleet are frontline vehicles. numerous specialty programs, expanded service areas with our recent consolidation of East Contra Costa and our contracted service for Pinole. So again, we manage the Ambulance Transport Alliance with American Medical Response. We have an aviation program with our Reach Air ambulances. We have a hand crew, which is a local government. We call it Crew 12. As you've probably heard, the CAL FIRE hand crews statewide have basically been disbanded, unfortunately. And so many large fire departments throughout California are forming and creating local government hand crews, which is a great way for us to get a lot of work done. And it also gives young folks that are interested in a career in the fire service a great opportunity to learn about what we do and really launches their career. Bottom left, you see one of our 2 fire dozers. Our dozers will maintain and improve fire trails in advance of wildland threat season. And then when we actively have fires, they help us put a perimeter around the fire and minimize the acreage that can be burned. We have on-call fire investigators 24 hours a day. We have a hazardous material program in coordination with working with county hazmat teams. We have really robust health and wellness program for all of our employees, which unfortunately continues to discover cancer in our folks, but fortunately early, so we can hopefully treat them. We recently added a canine that is an accelerant canine to help us investigate fire origin and cause. We have a marine program. We're actually going to beef up our rescue program, our technical rescue program. It's going to be a fully staffed company instead of a cross-staff company in July of 23. We have a UAV program, and then we participate in FEMA's urban search and rescue program as members of one of 8 teams in California, sponsored by the city of Oakland, and there's 28 teams in the entire country. And there's just a couple photos. That's a photo of our hazmat rig, top middle. That's Station 70 out in San Pablo, which is a new station about 18 months ago. And you see a picture of our drone there, and those are our hand crew folks in the middle photo. All right, so what's new? I covered a little bit of this, but about, well, a year ago now, we annexed EastCon. Or East Contra Costa Fire Protection District. We have already moved all of their engine companies to advanced life support with paramedics on every company. And we've of got 2 new stations planned out there. Tomorrow, we're actually adding an engine company out east. And all of those additions out east really help the entire district, because we have more bench depth to cover major emergencies wherever they are in the entire district. March 1st, we implemented our contracted service to the city of Pinole and actually opened Station 74 with Engine 74. That had been a station and an engine company that had been closed, I believe, for 10 years now due to the budget hits. So again, I spoke a little bit about Crew 12. It's a countywide program, great program. It is now a year-round program due to financial help from Measure X funding. And so those crews are out doing project work in the off season, and then they're helping fight wildland fires in the wildland season. And then they also help us get our engine companies released from structure fires. They could come do some of the dirty work so that we can free up our engine or truck companies to run other more emergencies at that point. Let's see, we've got several resident wildfire mitigation projects and programs. And we also recently reopened our Southern Walnut Creek Station, Station 4, which is a huge benefit to Lafayette. It gives us more bench depth on calls in Lafayette and Rossmore area. We opened new Station 86, and we opened Station 95, which was an EastCon station that they weren't able to open due to budget challenges, but the station was already in place, so we've staffed that as well. Again, we have construction plans for 3 new stations. 2 are out east, and then the other one is in Concord, right at 680. We're still trying to hopefully co-locate that on the airport site to serve the airport and the surrounding community. We have a SAFER grant that we've been awarded, which we're using to increase staffing out in the east part of the district and the county. And then in addition, that will help us staff our rescue company and fully staff it. So it's no longer a cross-staffed piece of equipment. And then we talked about the accelerant dog, whose name is Baxter. And there's a picture of Baxter right there. We've also got a photo here of some of the wind damage. Again, Crew 12 was really helpful in opening up roadways and helping a lot of our public works crews throughout the county because they were, completely overwhelmed with downed trees and trying to help out PG&E as well. Okay, these slides are a little complicated, but there's quite a bit of information in here. But these are a detailed look at the city of Lafayette calls through January of 23. So it's really only 1 month of data. But if you look at year over year, 2017 to 2023, we saw a drop in 2019 and 21 of about 153 or 160 calls a month. And in 2023, we're back up to 178. The far right is incident counts by month for the last 36 months. See some increases in May and December. May is typically when we start to have wildland issues, and December is typically a month where most people have illnesses. So those are really the reason for those increases. Let's see, incident, middle left is incident response count by hour of the day. So it kind of makes sense. We start to see an increase in call volume around 8 to 9, 10 a.m. when people are up and moving about. And then we peak at about 3 p.m. and then we gradually see less calls as the commute hours end and people are at home. Let's see. Middle right is incident counts by type. So total of 178 incidents for January of 23. Alarms are about 8.99%. Medical aids are 59.55%. The catch-all other unknowns are 21 and change percent. Our rescue calls are 2.81% and vehicle accidents are 7.3%. City of Lafayette appears to have had no structure fires in the month of January, which is good news. And then bottom left is average response times by unit IDs. The assigned companies here for Lafayette are engine 16 and then engine 17. We call it 117 or 116 in our CAD. So engine 17's average response time is 6 minutes and 19 seconds. Engine 16 is 8 minutes and 1 second. And then we have engine 15 as well with about 6 minutes and 31 seconds. So they run the bulk of the calls. Some of the other resources run calls if they're close in Lafayette. So you see me, I'm actually AC6. I stopped at a freeway accident in January. So that's why I showed up on the data stream here. Okay, and then bottom right is a population based on just map location of each call of the 178 calls. And there is a slight discrepancy on this. You'll see that the color that's used for fire structures, that's specific to the map, not the pie chart. Okay, let's see, we kind of covered this, but yeah, we've covered this one already, so I don't think we need to go through that. Okay, this is EMS data from our transport system. Again, EMS incident counts year to date. So for January of 23, we're at 96 for the city of Lafayette. During the COVID pandemic, we did see an increase and then we saw a bit of a drop, and we're kind of seeing an increase again as people aren't afraid to go to a hospital and they want to get treated. And these are all transports. When we look at the top right, transports versus committed and transfer times by month over the last 36 months. The orange is the transport time. So on average, it takes about 44 minutes from the minute an ambulance is at the scene of a patient by the time they are at the hospital. And then total committed time includes patient offload times and then record keeping documentation to actually transfer a patient to an emergency department. That delta is what we're trying to decrease so that we can put our ambulances back on the street in an available status instead of waiting at a hospital to transfer their patients. And this is a challenge statewide and quite frankly nationwide with pre-hospital care. Let's see, the middle left is transports versus committed and transfer times by hour of day. So basically what this is showing us is that when we're busier in the middle of the day, that ties into that time of day when people are up and about, we see longer wait times to transfer our patients. So that's a natural just struggle with more volume is more delay. Middle right is response and average times analysis by incident type and jurisdiction. So the average is 14 minutes. Now this is different than the 6 minutes and the 8 minutes we talked about for the engine companies. And that's when you get the first on scene paramedic there on a medical aid, for example. This data here includes code 2 non-lights and sirens of ambulances and behavioral health calls and any call that our ambulances might run on. So we see a longer average response time in those call types. Let's see, their bottom left is another average code 3 lights and sirens response time by different unit types. So we have engine 16 broken out and many of the medic rigs that will run in this area. And again, bottom right is a population of all the medical aids in the city. All right, so wildfire threat. Many would think and hope that all this rain is going to help us in the wildfire threat arena here in the city or actually anywhere in California. And unfortunately, and that's not the case. If anything, it may carry more fire when the grasses and the ground fuel dries out. We will most likely get a later fire season start than we have in prior years when we don't have as much rain as late as we've had this winter. But the rain does not make the fire threat go away, unfortunately, anywhere in California. What you have here is just a snapshot of the new CAL FIRE state, what they call SRA or state responsibility area mapping. And they've changed their mapping to include an extremely high fire hazard area, which is red, and then high fire hazard, which is orange, and I think the yellow is a moderate. What they have not done, and CAL FIRE is working on, is they still need to create all the maps for the LRA or local responsibility area, which would be your city and any of our cities. This has certainly drawn a lot of attention statewide, but it's been important work that CAL FIRE has done so that everyone really understands that the threat is real in California and it's not going to go away. So all we can do is try to mitigate it as best we can, make sure that our elected officials and our public safety partners, including law, we're all on the same page and we're coordinated, and that most importantly, our residents take it seriously and they have a plan. So again, no area of this county or the state is risk-free, but there are a lot of resources out there. We really encourage people to take defensible space seriously. We understand it's expensive. It's not free to clear someone's property, but it is well worth it. And have a plan with their family, escape routes, have go kits, have the 20 or 30 things that are near and dear to their family. Packed and ready to go so that they don't try to go back into their house and grab something they think they really need, because that's not worth it when it's really risky. Okay, we spoke a little bit about this already, but there still is considerable threat to really the entire county, and certainly the city of Lafayette. It isn't just the vegetation, but it's exterior fires that start and spread to a structure, or a structure fire that can spread to the vegetation, or a vehicle fire on a freeway that can spread to the vegetation as well. There are this link right here, which is a live link, will take you to, in fact, I'll just go to it real quick. So this is the entire state of California, if I can zoom out. So as I mentioned, CAL FIRE has worked with fire agencies throughout the entire state, and they have the entire state mapped at this point. But again, this is just the SRA or the state responsibility areas. Local responsibility areas are next, or LRA, and we're all looking forward to that. Okay, there are several tools out there. In fact, I was just at a meeting today with your police chief and Moraga's police chief in Arinda's, and Moraga Arinda's fire chief, and folks from Contra Costa County Sheriff's, from CWS, and we were talking about drills and public education we're going to be doing. But the CWS alerts is a really valuable tool for residents to know if potentially they're in harm's way and that they need to evacuate. And law enforcement and fire will coordinate when we have a wildland fire. And this new mapping system, which is Zone Haven, we have the entire county gridded out, so that law enforcement and fire leadership are all talking the same language when we decide that we need to evacuate a given area or multiple areas or zones. And so this campaign through CWS is to make sure that residents know their zone, so that if they see it on social media or hear it on a radio or on the news, they know that it's their zone or not. We certainly don't want people to evacuate that don't need to, because that causes a lot more stress, a lot more congestion and shelter issues and all sorts of problems. So it's really important that our residents really know their zone, and that we law enforcement and fire leadership, we're very coordinated when we do evacuations in any community. So we encourage the residents to be aware of that. Right. Then there's several documents and programs for fire safety for residents. And again, there is certainly a lot of focus on wildfire threat in California. Last year, quite frankly, we got off pretty lucky statewide. We had 2 major fires and several smaller fires, but we really didn't have the big massive fires we had the year prior. But it isn't just wildland fires. Residential fires pose a significant threat to our citizens as well in the community. Modern homes do burn faster. Modern furniture burns faster. It's hotter. It's more toxic. So simple steps can really save lives even before the fire department gets there. So it's absolutely critical that people have working smoke alarms on all floors and in every bedroom, as well as carbon monoxide alarms. But obviously none of those things work without batteries, or, many are now hardwired, of course, but it's really important to test those at least twice a year. Sleep with bedroom doors closed. That'll help prevent the spread of fire in a structure. And then have an evacuation plan for your family. You're going to meet, 4 houses down the street at your neighbors, or call family, so that people don't have to unnecessarily worry, and we don't have to put crews in a fire if we know everyone is out. That's safer for us as well. And again, our website, ConFire's website, we've got a ton of information for yourselves or the public to review. All right, and this QR code will link you to everything referenced as well, all the different links in the PowerPoint. So I'm available for any questions.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And we'll have questions from the council, and then we'll take questions from the public. So any question from a Councilmember Candell?
Thank you very much. Do you know, sorry about that, when the LRA maps may be available?
Let's see. I took a note. We are hoping in the next, let me look at one thing. I believe we're hoping to get those in the next 4 to 6 months from CAL FIRE. Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay. We'll take Oh, Councilmember Quam.
Okay, thank you for coming each year to give us an update, especially before the wildfire season. I definitely, with so much rain, it sort of puts us we think we're comfortable, but I appreciate your mentioning that, in fact, the fire danger could be higher because of all the vegetation growing and then eventually drying out. So we do want the public to know that this is still going to be a dangerous year that we have to prepare for. So that leads me to like two questions. Number one, the public outreach plans for the year, if wildfire threats continue to rise, what do you have planned this year? I know last year you collaborated with our city to do a webinar together, and you also did your own webinar. I think that was something that I think is important to continue to do that public outreach. Can you share with us your thinking on public outreach to get the public ready for this year's wildfire season?
Yeah, so our PIO does have some events planned. I'm not exactly sure what he has planned, but I believe it is the webinar again. Your police chief and I today were actually speaking about trying to do some informal events just with the community at different community gatherings where we have a fire truck or two and law enforcement. We have some handouts, so we're looking at doing that as well. We're coordinating with La Miranda. That was the meeting today, to talk about virtual evacuation drill, which is really important because it's not only the coordination of public safety, law and fire and county sheriffs, but it's actually citizens going through the physical paces to gather their belongings, get their family together, their pets, whatever is important, and actually get to their car. We're not promoting physically actually driving the car, but really sitting in the seat up to that point, because that's really where all the stress is. So there's several events that are being planned. We're coordinating some with Orinda and Moraga because of the connectivity between the three cities.
Great. It'll be great to see more presence out there from Confire. And so the second question relates to a topic that's come up in the past few years about the need for a station that can accommodate a ladder truck. And in past years, we were given the heads up that this was going to be essential, particularly with the housing elements and the potential for higher, taller building structures in the years ahead. And do you have any update on the need for a ladder truck in Lafayette and any plans to address that?
Yeah, I don't specifically. I know we've certainly talked about it. I know Chief McAllister is aware of the future need. There certainly is a future need. Exactly when, we don't know. But as development increases and vertical development increases as well, the need for us to have an aerial ladder on a ladder truck is really important. And one issue is the station on Diablo Boulevard is not a station that can accommodate a 65-foot aerial ladder truck, which is tiller. So we need to find a station that will accommodate that large of a piece of equipment. That's an issue. The other issue that the fire service is unfortunately struggling with nationwide is that our lead times to have a custom built fire truck are now 3 years. Used to be 13 months. And so, that all gets forecasted into our planning as well, but it's become very difficult for any fire agency in this country to get a fire truck built. And that's all on the heels of COVID and supply chain issues. So we are planning well in advance. It used to be that you could, if you had the money, you could get a fire truck relatively quick. But I'll share the question, the concern with Chief McAllister again. I know that he and Chief Bachman, our fire marshal, have definitely chatted about it, and they've shared a little bit with me as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just a quick question about the slide, particularly number 5 on your scattergram. It says 21% other unknown. What are those for the most part? Those type of incidents?
So other unknown is really kind of the catch-all. It's wires down, it's trees down, it's hazardous material investigations. It could be a smoke check that we don't dispatch out as a full structure response. Could be a gallon of oil on the side of the road, a paint can. It's really just our catch-all. And we break that down further, but it's typically not very entertaining, but it's the catch-all. One thing of note is that most fire departments in most jurisdictions about 75 to 85% of our total call volume are medical aids. So actually Lafayette is fortunately on the low end of the normal percentage for EMS calls in any jurisdiction really in the country.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions from the public?
Mayor Anduri, I have one hand raised for Jim McKee, and I will allow him to speak now,
Okay,
and he will have 3 minutes. Mr. McKee, we have you unmuted. You need to allow yourself to, there you go.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you, Assistant Chief Peters, for this presentation. Very helpful. I'm a resident here in Lafayette, and I'm working with the Happy Valley Improvement Association regarding its Firewise program. And I was hoping to hear perhaps some thoughts you might have about how Confire is working with the local residents to promote participation in Firewise communities to help mitigate risk from wildfires in the area. Any thoughts as to how the public can interact with you folks or get more involved?
Yeah, sure. Our Fire Marshal Assistant Chief Chris Bachman is in charge of the Fire Prevention Bureau. And I believe in Lafayette, there are already 5 or 6 Firewise communities or neighborhoods within Lafayette. And there certainly is value in increasing that number. So if any neighborhoods or groups of residents are interested, they can go to our website and contact under fire prevention and contact Chief Bachman. And our Fire Prevention Bureau can help with forming neighborhood or resident group Firewise communities.
okay,
Great.
thank you. Are there any other public comments or questions?
Mayor Anduri, I see no additional hands raised.
Okay. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you and your colleagues coming to us twice a year to update us. It's very valuable. So thank you.
Our pleasure. Thank you and nice to meet all of you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to agenda item 9C. And Tracy, would you like to introduce or?
So, thank you, members of the council. We have Thomas Adams, who is a representative from Avenue Services. I believe you have met Thomas via Zoom. It's his first time here in person. And he's just going to give you an overview of the last quarterly tax, sales tax.
Okay, so welcome in person to our meeting. And thank you also for providing the information in advance. That's very helpful for us to be able to take a look.
There we are. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Tom Adams. I'm with Avenue Insights and Analytics. We are your sales tax consultant for the city. Here to provide an update on the winter holiday period, the 4th quarter of the calendar year, on how your sales tax revenues are doing. We also, the other side of our business, so we provide forecast and sales tax data to staff. Work closely with Tracy and her team, Jennifer, et cetera. And we also provide audit services for the city to make sure you're capturing all the revenue that you're entitled to for the city. First, I wanted to just give you a brief slide on some recent history here in California, as well as in the city of Lafayette. This is a slide we put together fairly recently, just to give you some of the ideas that it's been sort of it's been a bumpy road over the last few years for many reasons. So we put together a slide. I'm not going to go through all the different elements of this, but we did have some new revenues right before what we call the Wayfair related Supreme Court case allowed the state to start taxing some out-of-state businesses and getting new revenue. So that was great. Great news about just over 3 years ago. Then COVID happened. We saw kind of a very dramatic sort of lockdown here in the state that affected sales tax revenues pretty dramatically for the 2020 year, calendar year. The 2021 year was really the year of recovery throughout the state. So we saw some very robust double-digit sales tax growth in the 2021 year. That also started to lead to inflation and those sorts of things that we're still dealing with today. So in the 2022 year that we're just coming off of, that we're showing at the far right of the chart here, we started having things like the Ukraine war with Russia. That also added to inflation and higher gas prices and those sorts of things. As a result, the Federal Reserve has started to start hiking interest rates up a bit, and that's been a big part of the news more recently. And we have kind of various federal government sort of reactions to the pandemic and as well as state reactions to the inflation more recently. So just kind of wanted to give you a kind of broad overview of some recent history in our sales tax world. We're looking at your city, specifically kind of what constitutes your sales tax base. Restaurants are a big part of it. Retail is also a big part of it. We also have what we call use tax, which is also referred to as the county pool, which is things like internet, some things coming in from out of state, also some businesses that report throughout the county all kind of funnel their sales tax through the county pool. It's about 20%. Couple of the other large ones, food and liquor markets, as well as gas stations and auto repair. Some of the smaller ones for the city here are construction, B2B, and other miscellaneous sources. Most recently, if we're looking at your cash performance, you can see we have about 6 quarters shown here. You can see those 3 quarters of sort of double-digit robust sales tax. The most recent, we've kind of gone into a little bit more the single digit. The most recent quarter that we're looking at today, down about 3.4% versus the prior year. That's put in context. A year ago in Q4 was a very strong fourth quarter as people had all that savings built up from the pandemic. And really the one of the terms people that were using was sort of revenge spending of having that pin up demand and really wanting to go out there and use their credit cards and use their dollars. We like to split sales tax into kind of 5 main categories: retail, food, transportation, construction, and B2B. And a smaller 6th one is the miscellaneous one. You can see the top line total receipts, as I had mentioned. We're in Q4 that we're looking at today. And it just so happens that Q4, that happens to be a calendar year. The calendar year splits, as I mentioned towards the beginning. We can see the pre-pandemic year kind of nicely in that 2019 Q4. You also receive the first quarter of that Wayfair kind of net new money coming in from Wayfair through the county pool that year. 2020 is really the kind of height of the pandemic, the effects, kind of that recessionary downturn. 2021 is, sort of consumers were really coming back strong in 2021. 2022, we're kind of getting towards a new normal. I don't think we're there quite yet, but we're starting to kind of get back towards more normal growth levels, at least over the last 3 quarters. We can see kind of some of your different areas, how they were affected during this time period. There was also some other trends that may have been happening before the pandemic that may have been accelerated by the pandemic. Things like brick and mortar retail really kind of starting to slow down a little bit as the internet was growing. Prior to the pandemic really accelerated that. And maybe what was happening, in a year in 5 years took place in about a year. So just some of those dynamics. And we see things like restaurants, really one of the most dramatically impacted statewide. This is very different from a normal recession. During a normal recession, high ticket items like cars, construction, those sorts of things, appliances are affected much more. This pandemic was very different because of this recession was very different because of its nature. Good news is you can see restaurants here back considerably above where they were pre-pandemic. So some good news there on sort of the recovery, if you will, and a few of the others there. So I mentioned restaurants generate roughly about 30% of your local business sales tax. If we include the county pool, some of that kind of use tax coming from outside of the area, almost a quarter of your sales tax. We like to show kind of the 5-year history on the left and a little bit more of kind of more recent history on the numbers on the right. You can see in the middle of this chart on the left, kind of that big drop off, kind of in the middle of the chart, that's the pandemic. And we've sort of been in that recovery mode ever since. These are economic numbers where we're kind of balancing out payments to prior periods and other sort of anomalies that go on. There's two different things. There's cash numbers that you get, kind of the cash the city actually receives. Then there's the economic numbers where we're sort of balancing things out so you can actually see what the economic performance is. As I showed before, the cash number is down a little bit. Economically, not quite that dramatic for your local businesses. So that's a good sign that you're continuing to grow a little bit. Needs to be put in the context we're having higher than usual inflation. So if we take into account some of that inflation during this period, it depends a little bit upon the category. Inflation has different amounts of certain things like gas stations, new cars, much higher inflation rates than other things like retail, not as much. So in that 5%, you can see it's about $35,000 there. Two of the primary reasons for that you can see are retail and food, to a smaller extent. Transportation had a little bit of a gain, and B2B had a little bit of a gain as well. The other piece, so the local businesses, if I could go back, this is about 80% of your sales tax pie. Your county pool is about 20%. Your total receipts, again, are a combination of your local businesses plus the pools, along with some audit adjustments, and the state has an administrative fee and that sort of thing. That's that second line. On the bottom half of this page, this slide, is your recent county pool activity, and your jurisdiction's percent of the total at the bottom there. You can see you're down about 17% for your county pool jurisdiction share. That's a little higher than the overall county. Again, we need to put this in context of we're coming off of unusually high levels of internet spending and that sort of thing, people going back to brick and mortar, people going back to spending on things like personal services, people going back to spending on things like travel. So it looks a little worse because of we had a little bit of spike, obviously, during the pandemic. We think we're kind of getting back towards what we might consider a more new normal type number. We do provide staff and the council with a sales tax forecast. This is what we discussed about 6 months ago in November. You can see we're about 3.6 for this year, and about, 1.6 for next year. We update these each quarter as we're going through the fiscal year. We're about halfway through the fiscal year at this point. In terms of our data that we get in terms of the city accrues back from August to show the actual sort of sales tax period. You can see we've downgraded a little bit, kind of about 1.8 for this year and about 1 for next year. We do a combination of kind of trending from your local business performance, sort of what you might call a micro economic analysis of trends, both for your businesses as well as for different categories. We also apply sort of a macro lens of what we see kind of potentially coming in the future. In the past, we leaned more on the micro side because things were a little bit more steady eddy. Since the pandemic started, we've needed to lean a little bit more on the macro side as we thought, okay, what's the pandemic effect going to be? When is the recovery going to start? What is the recovery going to look like? When are we going to get back to the new normal, et cetera? You can see sort of graphically how that has looked over time. Here on this page, we can see that big kind of drop off. For you guys, it's been kind of a V-shaped recovery, if you will, extended V, not a quick V necessarily. So you can see the effect there, and where the yellow is sort of where we are now, kind of getting back to that trend line going forward. In terms of our assumptions going forward, where we're kind of building that forecast in these out years, we're assuming a mild recession. When we say recession, mild recession, that may not even be termed a recession. There's a sort of obscure group, the National Bureau of Economic Research, the Business Dating Committee, that decides these things, and they usually decide them after the fact. So they use a variety of data points that help them decide these things. So we might also just kind of look at it as a slowdown, maybe a little bit of a downturn, whether it's called a recession or not. Our other assumption is that Federal Reserve has indicated that they will keep raising interest rates to help cool down the economy and continue to lower inflation. As to whether that's going to kind of tip us, we're going to get that soft landing, or whether we're going to get a little bit more of that hard landing, that remains to be seen, as whether those interest rate increases tip us into a recession or not. Our assumption is that inflation will moderate to more normal levels by the end of this calendar year. When I say normal levels, maybe 3%-ish. The Federal Reserve likes it more at a 2%-ish level, but it seems like their pronouncements have been a willingness to have a little bit more flexibility if we get down in that 2 to 3% level, somewhere around there. Also, supply chains will return to more normal levels by the end of this calendar year. We've already seen that happening pretty dramatically over the last year. Some caveats. We have a lot more uncertainty with the economy right now, sort of uncharted waters, maybe some choppy waters going forward. The recent banking sector volatility has just kind of added to that level of uncertainty. Greater uncertainty for our world means a greater potential variance with the forecast in the upcoming years. The good news for you guys, if I could just give an aside here, is you don't have so many recession vulnerable industries in your city. You're a little bit more of a steady Eddie player over time. So you're not going to have that sort of boom on the good side, but you're also not going to have that bust during a recession. So your variance is going to be a little bit more constrained. Obviously you're kind of restaurant heavy. So if we did, God forbid, have another pandemic, that is, the sort of thing, that's why you were affected more heavily during the pandemic. But during a regular recession, your sort of risk is much less than other cities we deal with. Some areas of uncertainty include, as we can see here, does a recession loom on the horizon? If we do see one, how deep, how long? What are gas prices going to do over the next several years? How much inflation will continue to impact the economy? How's the federal interest rate adjustments affecting the economy? It hasn't been too bad so far. Also supply chains, when ultimately will those sort of kind of get back to normal, and kind of what is that new normal going to look like and going forward? And that's it for my presentation tonight. Thank you for having me. I'm open to any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll take questions from the council and then from the public. So any questions from council members?
I have a quick question. Thank you so much for the presentation. We have invested some of our ARPA funds into supporting our businesses' recovery from the pandemic. And some of the things we're doing, I'm curious how we could measure if it's having effect. How could we possibly get any more granular information from you in terms of, like, say, how many people are frequenting restaurants, or how deep they're going in terms of expenses, just to better understand the numbers?
Yeah. So we can do so just a few items there. One is the sales tax information by business is confidential.
Right.
So we cannot share that. I know you guys know that. I
Understood.
just sort of say that for the public. Businesses report their number sort of on just a blanket number. So we don't have any way of seeing beneath that number kind of who those people are. Are they residents? Are they coming in from outside? Those sorts of things. But we can look at performance, sort of aggregated performance in a smaller area, as long as we have enough businesses within whatever category or whatever. So if you wanted to look at sort of a smaller area of downtown and say how, you know, our you know, restaurants on the town square are doing, you know, we can look at things as long as there's usually 4 or more businesses that are part of that grouping. We can look at those and say, how are they doing pre-pandemic? Kind of how were they, you know, during the 2020, and how are they doing today? And we can, you know, apply, you know, inflation and some other things with that if you're interested to look at specific things. So we work with staff. You know, if you have questions on that, I would encourage you to you know, send them along to staff, and we can discuss how to answer your question.
Great, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Kendall.
Thank you. A great report as always. So I know our personal taxes are delayed until October, right? Because of the emergency. Does this affect any of this information that you get, or any of the sales tax numbers? Are you going to have any effect from that?
No.
Okay.
So it's a good question though, because when I didn't mention it because it starts to kind of get in the weeds, but with that first slide that I showed is, is at the start of the pandemic, the governor offered some 90-day extensions to businesses to pay their sales tax late because of the impact of the pandemic. So if you're looking at it, you see these huge declines in Q1 of 2020. Well, the lockdown didn't happen until about mid-March, which was almost the end of the Q1 quarter. So it's interestingly, statewide, you see the decline for the first quarter, almost 19%, the second about 6%. The reality economically is about the reverse, is that the Q1 was down about 6%, Q2 was down about 19%, because of those late payments. So the governor has done that several times. He did that again in kind of the end of that year in Q4, and I think he did it again in Q1 of Q4 of 2020, Q1 of 2021. So that kind of throws off the cash results because people are paying in different periods. And that's part of kind of what we need to figure out on our end, is sort of what is the true performance going on versus kind of the cash performance, and how do we sort of adjust our whole model to deal with that. But we haven't really been dealing with that for a good year and a half. So
Great,
yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Other questions? No. Okay. Is there any member of the public who has a question or comment?
Any member of the public would like to address the city council at this time, please raise your virtual hand. Mayor, I have no speakers slips in the meeting hall, and I have no hands raised.
Okay, Mr. Adams, thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you for-
Appreciate your report. Okay, we're on to item 10, consent calendar. Would any council member like to remove an item from the consent calendar?
Yes, I actually just want to make a correction on the minutes. So that is item, what is that item? 10A.
Okay, so we'll move that. We'll come to it. 10A, anything else? All right, is there any member of the public who would like to suggest removing an item from the consent calendar?
Any member of the public would like to move an item from the consent calendar, please raise your hand now. Mayor Anduri, there are no hands raised.
Okay, so I can have a motion for approval of the consent calendar items 10B through E.
I'll move approval of the consent calendar 10B, C, D, and E.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Geringer, seconded by Vice Mayor Dawson. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, it's unanimous. So we're on to item 12A. So welcome, Ms. Robles. Welcome, Ms. Elrod. The floor is yours.
One moment. Good evening, council members, members of the public. My name is Diana Elrod. I'm your housing consultant, and we're presenting tonight a brief sort of update on the HCD comment letter, which I'll explain a little bit more about for the housing element. So this is only an informational update. We're seeking questions from council to inform our discussions that we are going to have with the State Housing and Community Development Department, also known as HCD, and research that we need to do to understand other jurisdictions who are in a similar situation as Lafayette. So the recommendation is to receive, file, and confirm the staff's further research that we're recommending. Just as a quick update, on June 30th, 2022, the city submitted its initial draft to HCD for its statutorily required 90-day review. On September 29th, HCD provided the first letter requesting revisions. On January 24th, 2023, the council adopted the housing element. On January 31st, the housing element was submitted to HCD for its statutory 60-day review post-adoption. And on March 29th, HCD provided a letter requesting additional revisions. As part of the staff report, we include a pretty detailed matrix of comments provided, which discusses the level of difficulty we believe in responding to it, whether or not the city council will need to make recommendations or have a policy decision about it, and a variety of other bits of information. Just to explain a little bit about what happens right now that we have received a letter from the state indicating that while we meet many of the statutory requirements, we're not there yet, according to them. There's no specific deadline for the city to submit its revisions to HCD. However, it's important to know that if HCD does not certify this or any other element by May 31st, then the city must complete any rezoning it's required to do by January 31st, 2024. And we assume that that is the case and that we are planning to complete the rezoning within that 1 year timeframe, regardless of when we actually resubmit. I think it's really important to note that in a letter dated, I think, March 16th from the Housing Accountability Unit and Enforcement, HCD is taking the position that only it has the authority to deem a housing element in substantial compliance, despite both case law and state law in the government code section 65585 to the contrary. What that government code allows is for a jurisdiction to identify why it thinks it is in substantial compliance, which is what we did. We included a lengthy attachment to your resolution adopting the housing element that discussed line by line every line or item in the housing element law and how we complied with every statutory requirement. However, HCD is taking the position that that does not hold, that ultimately it is the only one that can deem it in compliance. There are two items in the letter that rise to a very important level that we're going to be seeking council direction for a future meeting, but we want to make you aware of what those are and get some consensus on us going forward and researching how to address these. The state has indicated that it continues to believe our ADU projections are too high, despite the evidence that we provided to justify our assumptions. That's number one. Number two, this is the first time that HCD has expressly stated that the city must consider a suite of programs to address housing mobility in low density neighborhoods. What that translates to, and I'll explain a little bit in more detail in a second, but for the next, you can go to the next slide. I think that with respect to dwelling units, the comment was we wanted HCD's prior review found the element should either include additional analysis, such as the number of permitted ADUs, or rescale assumptions closer to recent trends, i.e. 20 to 25 DU per acre. Our comment included 37 permitted ADUs in 2022, which only is an average of 17 ADUs per year since 2018, which we don't include on this table. And that we assume approximately 35 ADUs per year throughout the planning period because of pent up demand and generally speaking, an uptick in the number of units being permitted. These assumptions, though, according to HCD, we should be looking at 20 to 25 ADUs per year rather than the number that we had included before, which is 35. Next slide. In terms of the second comment, the barriers to higher opportunity areas, I want to focus on the underlined part. You can obviously read the very first part. Basically, the city is primarily a concentrated area of affluence, an RCAA, and it is also the highest resource community. And as a result, according to HCD, this is what they say in the letter: the element should include a significant and robust suite of actions, not limited to the RHNA, to promote housing mobility and increasing housing choices and affordability throughout the city, but especially in lower density neighborhoods, e.g. through a program to allow missing middle housing types as one option. What this essentially means is, even though we may meet the RHNA allocation from what we've proposed, in order to meet the requirements of AFFH, HCD is requesting, or actually requiring, jurisdictions, not just Lafayette, other cities have gotten the same comment, that they need to look at a way to increase mobility and housing affordability options in lower density neighborhoods, i.e. single family neighborhoods. We have provided here, with respect to missing middle housing, what they have suggested here, there are other ways that may be, which we can talk about, that actually staff are going to work on researching other ways that other jurisdictions who are facing the same kind of comment are what they're planning to do. Residential buildings with multiple units at the scale of a house is what's considered missing middle, and this includes densities around 20 to 25 units to the acre. Here is an example that was built in 1947, 4 units on Sundale Road. It essentially looks like a single family or a series of single family units, but it's actually much denser than a single family. The second example is the 5 units on Chestnut Drive built in 2020. This is a common feature, having a common driveway for all units. This is a new housing type, and a lot of jurisdictions are selecting to meet missing middle issues. Next slide. With that, we wanted to obviously be brief, happy to answer questions, but we want to get some feedback from you, see if you have questions. What we plan to do is research ways to address these comments, especially in conjunction with other jurisdictions in the Bay Area who have received the same or similar comments, as well as working to schedule meetings with HCD to really dig down on these items. And then we will bring this item back to a future council session for more concrete direction. What we hope to do is bring sort of a bevy of options for the city council to look at. We also want to make sure that whatever we bring to the council is something we understand that HCD will accept, because we don't want to go around and around again without them saying, yes, this is what we want. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, before we have questions, I just want to confirm one thing. You mentioned early in the presentation that we would be doing our rezoning within 1 year. And I just want to confirm, we had already planned to do that. We
Right.
committed to do that. That's not something new because we got this letter from HCD.
Correct. But it's written in the letter that as a reminder that we have to do it if it's not certified by the state by May 31st. We were planning to do it anyway.
Okay, I just want to make sure everybody understands that that's not a new,
Exactly.
that's not a change. Okay. And then I also want to confirm, you highlighted these 2 items, and I know you're certainly open to comments, but you're not necessarily looking for direction this evening because you're still studying.
Correct. We just wanted to make you aware that these were the 2 of, there are other, these are not the only 2 questions. Trust me, there are many other questions.
Yeah.
But these are the ones that we felt rose to the occasion where we wanted to let you know that they were a significant issue that we were going to try to address and work with HCD on and get your understanding on it so that we can come back with some reasonable options that we're confident that HCD will accept.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll do questions from the council, then we'll go out for questions and comments from the public, and then bring it back for comments from the council. So now we're at the question stage. Any questions? Councilmember Kwok.
Sure. Have you had any meetings or with HCD after the letter was received by us? Are they have you had them, or are they scheduled?
We have not. We've reached out them several times and they are not responsive, have not been responsive, with the exception of giving us 2 examples of missing middle housing programs. That said, this has been a similar problem throughout the Bay Area, that many jurisdictions are not getting responses out of HCD because they're overloaded with housing elements.
Right. So you got your response by email as opposed to having had a meeting.
We haven't had any really discussion whatsoever with HCD. We've gone out a couple of times for that.
Yeah, just so it's on the public record, you asked by email for a meeting most recently on March 30th. I think that was the date.
I think there was a more recent one that was actually earlier Thursday or Friday last week.
Okay.
We reiterated, we are asking you again for this, and we've sent it both to our specific reviewer as well as the head of his unit.
Okay, so the first email was March 30th.
Yes, immediately.
Then you heard nothing and you followed up.
Yes,
And you still heard nothing.
exactly.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, I have a question. The affirmatively furthering fair housing and their comment about how you need to have density in other areas. How is that called for in the act itself? Because I don't know how many jurisdictions there are that the entire jurisdiction, I'm sure there's many, are high resource areas, but where in the act does it say that even if you're a high resource area, you have to spread out the housing?
There is language in the statute that requires jurisdictions to provide opportunities for additional mobility for people to lower income, not necessarily low and very low, but perhaps moderate income people, to have options or opportunities of development in historically high affluent, high resourced areas. HCD is the one who has interpreted that to mean that you must go in low density districts and create new housing there, for example, missing middle housing. So the specific requirement to say go into single family neighborhoods is not specifically in the statute. They're making that as what they translate that to mean what the statute says to mean. That means you have to go into single family neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kendall.
Sorry, this happened. We could tell by the matrix. This was a frustrating.
Just so you'll know, there are other jurisdictions that have even more comments than yours, and so I feel good about the effort that we made. So,
and you guys really did an amazing effort. So applaud you guys. So among those cities that they have had this comment about the AFFH and the other zones, I mean, I know Orinda got their housing element just approved and they didn't do any of that, right?
correct.
And what about Moraga?
They have, I don't know if they've gotten their letter yet, frankly.
Okay, all right.
Well, one of the things that we're doing is we're collecting all the certified housing elements and going not only just for these issues, but all the issues having to do with sites inventory, constraints and so forth. What was it about theirs that basically made HCD happy, and what can we learn from that? And every jurisdiction that I know of is doing that because they're all pretty much in the same boat. I don't feel Lafayette is special in many ways, but unfortunately is not, it's special about these particular issues. I.e. other jurisdictions are meeting them, having these same problems that Lafayette has.
Got it. So things, okay, I know one of the things that you guys suggested it was in suggestion in the spreadsheet was waiving impact fees for 100% affordable projects. And that, is there a way for us to get an estimate of how much that would be, how much of a cost? And so we would just understand what we're getting asked of.
I think that what we would, as we go through these, we would have, okay, this is what's being either recommended or required, and what is the consequence to the city. That's really a lot of what the research is that we have to do, because we don't know.
Great.
But it's definitely in there.
Another one, this is actually for the city attorney. Somebody suggested that we should send out, based on some of the comments that you guys made in the staff report, where some of the issues are being raised for the first time. They're contrary to earlier guidance. They should have been raised before, and some even maybe have factual errors. Should the city attorney maybe make a response in our defense, saying, hey, wow, we didn't get certified, but we really had no chance of understanding what was going to come back at us. And is there a possibility that a real response from our city attorney can happen? And might that help us if we have future legal challenges?
Yeah, our housing element is certified, correct?
You adopted it prior to January 31.
Okay.
So we believe we're in substantial compliance, as Diana indicated. I will defer to Diana. I'm a little concerned of a letter coming from me and how that might impact our expeditious approval of our housing element.
That's a very interesting question. I believe that what another jurisdiction was told was essentially, this is the way it is, and that there is nothing, this is my interpretation of what happened, was there's nothing that we could do to change their mind about what they say we have to do.
I'm not saying that would change HCD's mind,
Mhm.
but other cities are getting sued by these outside groups, right? Would it help us legally?
I don't think, but personally, I'm not a lawyer.
Right.
Although I do like to practice law without a license from time to time. I think the issue, and Mala can correct me if I'm wrong, that it's going to get litigated. I prefer that it not be any one of my clients get litigated.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are other jurisdictions that are moving towards that this issue of the law says we can do this. And
I'm not suggesting that we litigate.
No, I know,
right?
I
Yeah.
understand that, but it puts us in a difficult position with the state, who's already very unhappy that all the jurisdictions adopt it by January 31st. They thought they were going to get another 90 days, frankly.
Can we suggest that city attorney and you discuss?
Mm-hmm.
We can.
As part of this, what the
Well,
best-
what's the best way to do? Yeah.
we'll leave that to you.
That
Great.
would be great. And I understand the concern from Councilmember Kendall, just putting us in a good defensible position should we receive a lawsuit. So it's balancing that with also getting our housing element approved by HCD.
Thank you. Sorry, that was only a question, but thank you. I took it a little farther than that, but anyways. In our arguments towards these, how does SB 9 play at all with any of the, I know they don't let us count them, but does SB 9 and the amount of projects that have come in, just as a narrative for a policy?
My understanding with other jurisdictions who actually have a robust SB 9 program that has not swayed HCD that they want something different, because the density would not necessarily be enough in their mind.
Okay, right.
It doesn't, I want to add, mention that I don't think anybody is suggesting that we should like upzone to 35 units to the acre, but that they're like in the downtown currently is for multifamily. I think they're trying to break some of give more opportunities for slightly higher density housing. And I think that's what they're going for. And like Renata's slide showed, we're talking, maybe 20 units to the acre. I mean, right now, you've got I don't even know. I can't even tell you because I don't know. R6, what is that equivalent of? How many units to the acre?
6 units to the acre and R10. But I think, yeah.
So it's an opportunity to develop housing on maybe corner lots or right near a big street or something. And it doesn't have to be everywhere. We can be strategic about it, I believe, but we need HCD to say, yes, that sounds great. I'll just add one other thing. And one thing that we'll be looking at also is some jurisdictions are now looking at an overlay district just for faith-based development and having that as an opportunity to increase housing density in those areas. Again, I mean, there are a lot of moving parts with that. CEQA withstanding CEQA, but a lot of issues related to that. So we want to look into those things and bring them to you so you can talk about them and make a decision on what you think is the best suite of programs, as HCD says.
Okay. Councilmember.
When you pointed out like a certain corner and zoning that, is that different from spot zoning? Or is there a change in?
It may or may not be. We may be able, it sort of depends on how it's crafted. It might be a certain section of a street or something. I don't know. Obviously I don't have ideas firmly formed in my brain, but I'm just trying to, these are the kinds of things that we have to think about. We would obviously not be spot zoning anything.
I think just to follow up with that, I think San Francisco did that, right? Didn't they say that on corners they can be taller or something like that? I think there are some examples of cities.
I'm sure. Yeah. Even with a housing overlay, for example, you could do it rather than it could be all sites of a certain size, all, faith-based institutional sites, whatever. But these are some of the things that we have to do research on.
Okay, I have a question. In our materials, there was a March 10th letter from board members of Inclusive Lafayette that we had not yet received. And it concludes, or the penultimate paragraph concludes by saying Lafayette's biased public input process violates the very core of AFFH. It excludes the disabled, large families, extremely low income households, all the groups whose needs a housing element is legally required to address. Actually, that's preceded by saying that almost all of the public commenters on Lafayette's housing element for the past 4 months have been older white homeowners. Older white homeowners are as important a community as any other, and their input is worth collecting. But since receiving its review letter from HCD, Lafayette's housing element planning process has empowered older white homeowners to dominate the conversation, causing the exclusion of many other stakeholders from meaningful consideration in the decision-making process. Do you know if this has gone to HCD?
I don't know. We don't know because we haven't gotten everything from HCD yet.
Okay.
We've requested letters of everybody who provided input to HCD.
Okay. I mean, what is your feeling about our process?
I think our process was very robust. I don't agree with the comment. I feel as though we reached out in ways in order to reach every single doorknob in the city, not just homeowners, but every doorknob. We had opportunities left and right, and we continually look to places like apartment buildings, faith-based organizations who represent groups. If they, could we do more? We can always do more. But the question that we haven't done anything, I think, is really an unfair judgment.
Thank you.
And I will just add, we did meet with Inclusive Lafayette board members to discuss other mechanisms they felt would be appropriate to conduct further outreach and improve our processes. So
Okay.
an
And,
ongoing conversation.
and what did they suggest?
They didn't have any concrete suggestions at the time.
Okay. All right. Any other questions before we go to public comment? Okay, so we know public here. So is there anyone online who would like to comment on this item? Comments or questions?
Members of the public, the city council is now accepting comments on item 12A. And I have 2 hands raised. So our first speaker will be Robert Lavoie. Go ahead, Mr. Lavoie.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Great, thank you. I did send in a couple of letters and thank you for reading those. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that I didn't get to earlier. And Michael Griffith asked if I could use his time. I don't know if you'll cede his time to me, but he offered that. Yields over 100% likelihood. I was a little shocked that HCD was questioning this, but they were talking about if we had ground floor retail. And we've had some models. Colin Elliott shared some models to show that that's very viable in Lafayette to have ground floor retail and parking and still hit over 100% on the yield with the base density. And looking at our, they were even questioning the 90 to 95% yield that we used. Looking at our 2022 projects, 125% was the yield. 2021 projects were 119% of the yield. Not in 2020. And back in 19 and 18, they were 98% yield. And that's even with Samantha Homes, who accepted a lower density because they were considering the concerns of the nearby daycare. So they didn't have to do that, but they did because they wanted to be good neighbors. Let's see. And the other thing to note is there's most of the new developments are displacing retail. So even though the city wants it, it doesn't mean it's going to happen. My second comment is the reference to sort of this idea of a sort of a ghetto along the freeway. And I just wanted to dispute that again. The highest value condos are Woodbury, and they're selling for between $765 and $1,287 a square foot, which is eclipsing the prices of Happy Valley mansions per square foot. It's a popular area to live. And most of the beneficial, what do they call them, services are in that area. So you've got your planners recommend developing low-income housing in those areas. You've got good schools within walking distance. BART is really our only reliable and frequent mass transit. Grocery and service businesses are all concentrated in that area. It's, like I said, it's very popular. Look at 210 Lafayette Circle. Again, those are $2 million condos because people want to walk to these services. It would also reduce the number of VMTs, which is a big concern for everybody.
So, Mr. Lavoie, I know that you said that Mr. Griffiths had ceded his time to you.
Mr. Griffiths is not in attendance.
How much longer do you have?
Just a couple of seconds here.
Okay, please proceed.
I sent in the analysis on the ADUs, so hopefully you can look at that. HCD also has been referring to height limits, setbacks, density caps, and parking requirements as significant restraints. And yet the city has acknowledged that we can only have like 5 meetings, and developers get the rush treatment through the planning process. I've seen single family homes dragged on for years. and yet developers can push their big projects through very quickly. So I think they need to change that view. And they also aren't allowing us to count parcels under 0.5 acres, but 2 of 3 of the past 2 years have yields over 100% under a half acre. So anyway, I'll wrap it up there.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Lavoie? Okay, thank you very much. City Clerk Robbins.
Your next speaker is Allison Hill. Oh, Kat. Allison Hill, please unmute yourself.
Good evening. I would like to thank staff and the council for all the work they have put in to the housing element, and that's still ongoing, I understand. I would like to talk a little about ADUs. I think they're one valuable piece of the process. They certainly are not the only answer. We have to do many different things. I'm not sure about counting applications. I believe there's a significant gap or delay between applications and actually ADU housing that is built. I also have read Mr. Lavoie's comments on ADUs, and certainly some of them would satisfy low-cost housing, those which are built for family members who are either seniors, young adults, disabled people. But I think that that's only a portion. That's not the entire use of ADUs. Some people will build them as rental units to supplement incomes, and we all know that rents in Lafayette are quite high. And from my personal experience, I think some people are building ABUs as their private guest houses so that they will not even be on the rental market. I would hope that as this process goes on, that we could find the time. I know finding staff time is very difficult, but to do some study or follow-up on ADUs and the rents and the way they're being used, so we have a broader idea of the whole thing. But I do like the streamlining of the process, and that is now allowed when earlier it was not. So I will not take any more of your time, but that was one of my concerns.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions for Ms. Hill? Okay, thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Kathy Wally.
Hello, good evening, Council. Can you see me?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. So unfortunately, I was hoping you could see me as well. That's all right. Good evening to you, Council. I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak. I'm Catherine Wally, and I am a resident and homeowner in the city of Walnut Creek. I first would like to express my gratitude to the city staff for their hard work and recommendations on the housing element. I know it is a long process. While I am a resident of an adjacent city and I am engaged with work being done in Walnut Creek to support housing within our city limits, over the years, it's become clear that our cities do not operate in silos, but rather that what occurs in one city greatly impacts what occurs in our neighboring cities. Each of our communities are stronger when our neighbors are strong. The capacity to provide housing for all of our residents of all income levels is largely contingent upon the work done in our neighboring municipalities. To do the work that they can to support housing opportunities for all, be it through greater density by upzoning, increasing the percent of ADUs assumed to be market rate, or adopting creative solutions and programs, such as opportunities to support the building of affordable housing on faith lands. On a personal note, one of the many reasons why I strongly support housing policies that promote opportunities for housing for those of all income levels is because of the ways in which the housing crisis has impacted the field I work in. I'm an American Sign Language and English interpreter who works in cities throughout the Bay Area. Over the years, as the cost of housing continues to climb, I've observed a noticeable decrease. There are fewer numbers of interpreters who work in this highly specialized field who are able to afford living here. The end result is that many of my colleagues are leaving the Bay Area and our clients are left without communication access. And by our clients, this is not only the deaf and hard of hearing community, but it is all of us. Each of us uses ASL and English interpreters, even when we don't realize we're using them, for example, at public meetings. Another impact is that those interpreters who are best positioned to stay in the area are often those with access to intergenerational wealth or who have spouses or partners who work in high income sectors. As a result, our local interpreting pool is becoming more homogenous, less diverse, and as such, less equipped to provide the culturally and linguistically responsive interpretation for the diversity of clients we serve. While I work in one specific field, the same trend is occurring in many of the service-based fields that our community utilizes. Our quality of life, and by that I mean all of us, even the most wealthy, is contingent upon access to the services that we need to live a fulfilling life, safe life, a life that has healthcare, a life that has those in the fields that provide us with the things that we need, be it medical care or medical assistance or what have you, as well as interpreting. So thank you for your time. This is truly a crisis, and I hope that you can do whatever you can to strengthen this housing unit, not only so that it gets approved, but also so that we can create more opportunities for housing for everyone. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Are there questions? Okay, thank you again.
Jeremy Levine, followed by Max Henniger.
Good evening, Council. Really appreciate your time tonight and really appreciate staff bringing this item forward to the city so quickly and providing time for this discussion. Before I make my comments, I just want to address a council question. Inclusive Lafayette did not send our last letter to HCD. It wasn't even intended as a public comment. We did not have a lot of time to gather our thoughts, so we wrote them quickly and sent them to staff and wanted to discuss them with staff and explore opportunities to move forward without public criticism. And I regret that it has come across the way that it has. We were trying to provide policy advice that we could work with the city on. And that's really what our goal is. You heard from Allison, you're going to hear from other Inclusive Lafayette members. We have some policy proposals that we think could help the city get its housing element certified. And our goal is to work with the city to get a really good plan for housing that the state can certify. When HCD asks for more analysis in their letters, it can be tempting to try and create these ever more elaborate analyses, try and justify that the status quo is fine, that the policies we have are not a constraint. The city could save itself a lot of time and do a better job promoting housing if we focus on the policy changes to address the constraints we have in place rather than the analyses that we can do. And it'll make staff's lives a lot easier if we focus on future policy rather than analysis of what we've done in the past. And when we're thinking about how to respond to what HCD is asking and how to contextualize what HCD is asking, it's worth considering that HCD takes public comment very seriously, as is required of them by statute. Public comments that accurately reflect requirements of state law should influence the city's analysis, and HCD, again, takes that seriously. It's part of their mandate. So that's part of why it's hard to just copy and paste methodologies from other cities, because those cities didn't get the same public comments. They don't have the same context. And again, it's the law that HCD has to consider those public comments and the context that they bring to HCD's attention. So Lafayette has received a lot of comments in the past few months. East Bay for Everyone sent comments, the Housing Action Coalition sent comments, raising questions about some things in the housing element and providing recommendations. And you know, there are new things in the housing element, then part of it may be HCD following its mandate to read those comments. Again, our goal is to work with the city on responding to HCD's comments and create a really good plan for housing. When I started reviewing Lafayette's housing element over 2 years ago, I was a volunteer, and I continue to be a volunteer for everything I do in Lafayette. I do work in housing advocacy as a professional elsewhere, and I have reviewed dozens of housing elements as part of that process. I'm pretty confident that Lafayette's housing plan will be certified if the city follows Inclusive Lafayette's proposals. And so we wrote a letter with some of our recommendations, reiterating them. Like I said, you heard from Allison, you'll hear from other board members, and we look forward to working with the council, the staff, the entire Lafayette community on creating a great housing plan for the next 8 years. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for Mr. Levine? Nope. Thank you very much.
Your last speaker is Max Henniger. You can unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hello, and good evening, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening, and thank you, staff, for bringing this item to council's attention for feedback. I want to reiterate a point that Jeremy just made. As a fellow board member of Inclusive Lafayette, our goal as an organization is that we continue to work with city staff and council to get to the point where Inclusive Lafayette can write a letter to HCD in support of the housing element to urge its immediate certification. And that's why we want to continue to submit public comments with policy ideas to get to the point that we can be in a position to offer that support publicly. One of these policy ideas that we want to talk about tonight was in the staff report, and it surrounds supporting affirmatively furthering fair housing through missing middle. And we think that this offers a tremendous opportunity to Lafayette. Missing middle housing provides more affordable housing to both seniors and young people. The way that it does this is somewhat counterintuitive. Many people cannot afford a 4,000 square foot home, but they might be able to afford a 1,000 square foot home. So allowing 4 1,000 square foot homes instead of allowing a single 4,000 square foot home on a single lot, even though they would take up the same building mass, allows for a city to create more affordable housing. And critically, it's housing that either seniors or young people would be in a better position to afford, as many folks are not in a position to purchase a single family home. I also want to note that this isn't a dramatic change from types of housing that already exist in Lafayette. The community or the neighborhood that I live in, Sunset Village, actually had a picture in it from Diana's presentation. I walk by that home on Sundale every day when I walk my dog, and you see a duplex right next to a single family home. And both are about the same size, yet it allows for more smaller and more affordable units to be there. So our suggestion is that the city consider upzoning all D1 and R6 zoned neighborhoods to allow a minimum of 4 units. This would be Sunset Village and the Trails neighborhoods by the elementary school. If you look at the zoning map of the city, it largely comprises those areas. Because of SB 10, there's there wouldn't be a CEQA requirement needing to pursue this upzoning, which is an added benefit. We think I also want to say too, the idea around faith-based a faith-based overlay is also really interesting. That's a great way to get 100% affordable housing. I also work in affordable housing professionally, and we often look to work with faith-based groups to build, and often the zoning is a barrier. So knowing that you have an overlay there could make land that a willing faith-based partner has really come to fruition. That's all that I have this evening. Thanks again, council, for your time and for your hard work on the housing element. And thank you, staff, for bringing this item to council so quickly after getting the HCD comment letter.
Thank you very much. Are there questions? Okay, thank you. Are there any other?
There are no
speakers?
further speakers.
Okay, we'll close the public comment and bring it back to the council. I just want to ask one follow-up question based on one of the comments. And that, and it was Mr. Levine was saying we would save a lot of time. I think this is in his letter as well. If we made changes to policies rather than doing further analysis. My understanding is that we're doing an analysis in order to support. Well,
It's both. We definitely may need to change some policies, add some policies possibly, or programs. But we also have been explicitly asked to provide more analysis, and I feel very uncomfortable not complying with that request from the state. If they ask us for analysis, we need to provide it.
Okay, thank you.
If I might, in the comment letter, both comment letters, there's always like a request for analysis and then the line of adapt your programs to address this. That's always the follow on. So it's yes and.
Okay, thank you. All right, questions, comments? Thanks, we're on comments now. Councilmember Kendall.
These are still just some questions. So I know people are questioning the use of the ADUs and the, how many are affordable or whatever, but we got the numbers that we were supposed to use for those from HCD, right? Like the amount in the very low, moderate. We got them.
The question in this is not the affordability distribution. Actually, that number was provided by ABAG in analysis with Berkeley, and HCD said we can use it.
Perfect.
But the numbers themselves is something that we have to generate.
Correct. No, that question was for the first part, for sure. This is another, and this is. So if we upzone into our R1 zones, which is something that they're asking, what are the ways we can actually make sure that they are affordable? Like, can we force any sizes? Can we force any deed restricted affordable percentages? What are the laws that we can, like, instead of being McMansions, how do we make sure that these things are affordable? I know ADUs do it by size, but how do we do it if we upzone?
Well, I think the theory of the missing middle is they also do it through the size of the units, that presumably a unit that's 1,000 square feet is less expensive than a unit that's 4,000 square feet. I have, that's the thrust. In terms of actually ensuring affordability, that's not been the question that's been asked of us. We have an inclusionary zoning program. We're planning on looking at it again in the future to look at possible changes. We might be able to find some ways to apply inclusionary to some of those kinds of units that we come up with. But right now, the ask of us is simply to provide housing that addresses what is termed missing middle without necessarily addressing specifically the affordability of it. It's presumed to be a more affordable to somebody making moderate income than somebody making, above moderate income.
But can we add size restrictions?
I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, definitely that's something that we'll look at as part of our development process.
Great. Thanks.
Or the development process, sorry, of the housing element.
Thank you. Thanks. So I'm done with my questions.
Okay. Comments, Councilmember Kwok?
Yeah, my question, like, this is definitely a lot of work being asked of us and to do the analysis that you've talked about. I mean, I think when I look at just a thin document, it actually has like a bunch of staffing needed, and I wonder, my question is, do we have sufficient staff and consulting time budgeted this year to really move at the speed we need to move this year to, I know you said there's no particular deadline, but there's a until January of next year, we would probably like to do some cycles and get this through with. So I don't know that we've budgeted for appropriately. So I don't know whether staff is ready at this meeting to say whether we're sufficiently staffed or whether we need a burst of additional staffing to make sure we can deliver like all this work within 90 days or what have you.
I would believe that that is a question to ask the city manager and the planning director, because I think that they're more attuned with, what's going on.
I think also, as demonstrated in the matrix, there are a number of questions we still have from the state that will help direct the amount of staff time needed towards these endeavors. But we'll certainly keep an eye out on that and bring back a report on if any other resources are needed.
Okay. Other questions or comments?
Well, as a comment, I would say I appreciate, I think it was very helpful to put it into a matrix form, to rank it, to let us know where city council needed, you would need our guidance. And so I think just to state the obvious, I think that within the last 9 or 10 days that you've had to work on this, I felt that staff had done a good job, at least for my expectations coming into this meeting to see what we were going, to scope the work essentially. I felt that that is a good job. So just to state the obvious, well done.
Okay, well, Councilmember Garrett.
Well, I was actually going to say something similar, but thank you for saying that. Definitely thank you for the matrix and thank you for the thought that's gone into that. I guess my question is that Renata just said that a lot of this requires getting some answers from the state and getting HCD to set up meetings and set up those sort of technical advice, sessions so that you can talk to them. And I have heard from a number of people that they're having a very hard time getting any response at all from HCD. And so I guess what I'm wondering, and I don't know if this is, I don't know who this question would be for, but is there a political way to, try to make that happen? I think we've asked this question several times over the last couple of years in terms of, I don't know if it's our legislators, I don't know, is there any path you've seen, Diana, with people who have actually gotten this conversation?
Can I ask, because I'm having had a discussion with some people on, maybe we can leave that.
Okay.
With the consultant and planning department and the city manager.
Oh, okay.
As to, I'm just thinking in terms of.
We're working.
And she's saying,
we're starting by working through staff and kind of going up. So, yeah.
Okay. So at that point, now I'm looking forward to hearing what the mayor's up to.
No, I'm just gonna, my job is to restate the obvious here and to say that I thought the matrix was brilliant. Obviously, a lot of work went into it, but it was organized things in a way that was just very easy to deal with. So thank you very much. And I also want to thank Mr. Lavoie and the other and the Inclusive Lafayette and the other organizations that have come in. I appreciate the fact that 3 of the board members of Inclusive Lafayette came to speak this evening. It's all very helpful to get this input, and I encourage everyone to keep providing the input as you continue working. So thank you very much for all that you've done on this.
Some more, I have some more.
Oh.
So, sorry. So on the ADUs, people have suggested in part of the process, we said we were going to have a robust review process of how well we're creating and generating ADUs, right? So that's down the road. Would there be any benefit of starting to go out and doing some of that outreach now? And if it's not the city, because you guys are just, up to here, a bunch of residents have said they've offered, and would that be helpful?
Yeah, so certainly we would be happy to coordinate with any members of the public, but
Okay.
I would note that as part of our last round of revisions for the housing element, we did collect the contact information for ADU applicants for the past 5 to 8 years. I think
Fantastic.
for the beginning part of this cycle, and sent them a survey asking information about when they applied, what the barriers they experienced were, how many bedrooms, if it was for family, what the rents would be if they were renting it. So we were trying to collect that information, and we got a fair number of responses. And we do have a program in the element to create a survey for applicants as they come in of their intentions. But of course, like whether or not it gets permitted or built in the end is also a thing that we were surveying for the past applicants. So we'll continue to look through that information, and we're happy to seek out any ADU owners who want to provide
Okay,
more
great.
information.
Thank you. All right, so I'll pass that on. And then so are we okay to, so you got the direction to figure out that if a letter would be appropriate at this time, and obviously coordinate. And I really do want to find out what tools we have if we do take on a broader upzoning or overlays or whatever. How do we just make sure we get affordable units out of this? Because that's the goal, right? That is truly, and I think everybody agrees on that. But without any guardrails, Lafayette is not known for creating affordable units, out of the woodwork. And so if there's anything we can do to try to encourage that, or even, put it in our whatever zonings that we put in.
I just want to make a comment following up on that. It's an interesting nexus between the next agenda item in terms of the multifamily, the BOLD program we were
Right.
discussing. And one of the things we were talking about was how would that work if there was someone who was looking for financing in a single family home? And obviously we didn't want to do that. We wanted to focus growth downtown. But it does kind of beg the question, if you were going to look at upzoning, so to speak, does density bonus apply? If you have 4 units and you build one, that's maybe smaller than the rest, but it's still in that affordable place. Where does that end? So that is definitely something we'd be interested in pursuing, exactly that, figuring that out. But thank you so much for this work.
Okay, thank you. All right, then in accordance with council policy, we'll take a 5-minute break until 9:28. 8. We'll resume the meeting. We are on item 13A. Consideration of joining California Municipal Financing Authority and adopting the BOLD program. Ms. Robinson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and jury members of the council. This is an ongoing public hearing regarding joining the California Municipal Financing Authority and adopting the BOLD financing program. So this is, I believe, the third time that this has been before you. You had several questions that we answered at your last meeting. You directed a subcommittee comprised of Vice Mayor Dawson and Councilmember Kwok to specifically consider eligibility criteria for potential BOLD projects. The subcommittee met several times. And as Councilmember Dawson alluded to earlier, felt that the program could be very beneficial to help the city achieve its housing goals, specifically by allowing developers an option for lower cost of capital. This could also be very good in terms of achieving affordable housing targets within the city, particularly because we, as you know, we do have an inclusive housing ordinance, and it may be challenging for developers to build that affordable housing, and this gives them an option, again, to lower their overall costs. So there were a number of eligibility requirements that the subcommittee considered. Ultimately, there are 4 that they are recommending. The first is that projects be located in zones that allow for multifamily development. I'll note that the wording on that is slightly different than it was in the staff report, but we feel like this is actually more clear. Second, to ensure that there are significant benefits to the community, projects must include one of the following, and that would be affordable housing, or other measures as proposed by the applicant and approved by the city council. This was left open specifically so that developers could be flexible in coming up with some maybe creative ideas. The 3 that are listed here would be project goes beyond the minimum requirements for public open space, the project is all electric, or the project goes beyond the minimum public art requirement. Those are only suggestions. So again, this would allow staff and the developer to come up with some creative ideas, which the council could then consider. Third eligibility requirement would be to put a 1.8% maximum cap on the tax rate for any given parcel, including all the taxes and assessments. So this would be calculated at the time of sale, 1.8%. It would not preclude any other additional taxes being levied against the parcel if they were to pass. So this is only 1.8% at the time of the sale of the property. And I believe, and we can verify, I do have a couple of people who are available to answer questions, that this tax is actually, what I'll say is a flat, like a parcel tax. So the percentage will actually, I believe, go down over time as the assessed value of the property goes up. So I believe it's a flat amount of money as opposed to a percentage. And then the last thing is that to sunset the policy on December 31st, 2031, which coincides to the end of the current 6th cycle housing element. And we propose sunsetting specifically so that there would be a date certain which the council and staff could assess if this was a successful program, and make a point of assessing it. And if it is successful, continuing it, of course, the council can at any time choose not to approve projects if they don't feel it's working out the way they would like to. So the recommendation before you is to adopt resolution 2022-69, which approves, authorizes, and directs execution of the joint exercise of power agreement. The second is to adopt resolution 2022-70, authorizing the use of bond opportunities. That's the BOLD program, and I will note that it is in I believe section 3 of this particular resolution, where it references exhibit A for that resolution, which specifies the eligibility requirements. So those are basically 3 recommendations before you. That concludes my report. As I said, there are some people who are attending via Zoom available to answer specific questions about the program. I believe we have somebody here from the underwriter. We have, I think, the developer who will be coming probably before you at a later date if this is approved. And there's a third person, not exactly sure exactly what the role is, but is available.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the report, and thank you very much for the subcommittee for working on this and bringing the recommendations to us. I think this is fairly straightforward, so I don't think we need to ask any of the parties we've heard from before to comment, unless they want to comment during the public comment period to say that there's something that concerns them, because I think we're moving forward with this. So we'll open it now for questions from the council. And actually, if a council member has a question for a bond counsel or others, you can ask that. Then we'll go to public comment and questions, then we'll bring it back to the council. So does any council member have a question at this point? Okay, seeing none, is there any member of the public that has a question or a comment?
And Mayor, you're opening the public hearing on this
And I'm
item.
definitely opening that public hearing at this moment.
The mayor and council members are taking public comments for items 13A. If any member of the public has a comment, please raise your hand now. Mayor Anduri, there are no hands raised and I have no speaker slips.
Okay, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the council for comment. And again, I think a great job on this. Thank you, Tracy, for moving this forward. We have comments. Are we ready for a motion?
Then I will I do have comments and actually amendments to the exhibit A that's being presented today. And that is that just to step back a moment, the BOLD program is a financing program that helps to reduce the cost of capital for projects, which I sort of liken it to, like, if I could wave a magic wand and reduce the price of lumber and, reduce the price of construction, that would be a good thing. So we can't reduce the price of lumber, but we may be able through programs like this to reduce the cost of capital. So that's where I come from. That being said, the exhibit A puts some guidance on, what type of projects could come in and request this financing. And I would just add that I want to appreciate Jim Cervantes, who participated in one of the meetings with us. He is professionally a retired bond consultant, municipal bond consultant. So this is sort of his area of expertise. And we did go through the whole Truckee list of a very long list, longer than we have here in Exhibit A, to try to see what was best for Lafayette, and particularly appreciating his GPAC role. And so I think this is informed not just by the subcommittee and staff, but at least one member of the public who has domain expertise. Anyways, so it's 1, 2, 3, and 4 that staff has read through. I would like to propose a clarification for item number 1. We did get a feedback from a member of the public on the sentence that said that the project should be located in areas zoned for multifamily use. And the amendment is suggested that the projects are located in zones that allow for multifamily development, because there is slight nuance there and I think our intent was to encourage multifamily development. Use this so that I think that's language that both staff and Vice Mayor Dawson and myself were amenable to. So I would just float it amongst the other council members. I'll read it again. That number one, projects are located in zones that allow for multifamily development. We'd like to further clarify that on item number 3, which discussed a 1.8% maximum cap on the tax rate for any given parcel, including all taxes and assessments. And we know that the state of California has a 1% parcel tax, right? And so the idea, as we've discussed in past meetings, was to sort of have not an unlimited ability, but to have a cap. But the question was raised, or actually our council has provided more precise language, which therefore I'd like to scratch the language that's been presented and read into the record a revised sentence that I think captures this more precisely than what's here. And that is, the city shall not approve any third-party financing, including the BOLD program, that would result in a total tax on any parcel, including the 1% ad valorem property tax and any other parcel tax that exceeds 1.8%. What that nuance means in part is that at the time of approval, the cap would be 1%, but we cannot for 20 years ahead, there may be additional taxes that may accrue, but that, we can't contemplate. So as long as on day one, when we're approving this program, we want to make sure that they're under the 1.8% cap. I think that was the clarification that we wanted to make here. So those would be the 2 amendments.
Okay, and then one that Ms. Robinson made, I want to make sure when she read it, was to delete at least from item number 2. So projects must include one of the following.
I'm fine with that, and that's a good correction.
Okay. Vice Mayor Dawson.
I do want to ask the question that we raised earlier when we were talking about capping the taxes. This was a discussion we had. One of the questions we asked when we had, I guess, the underwriter here was whether or not the below market rate units would be taxed a special rate or not, if they would be exempt from that. And because if you're building, and you're trying to do the affordable housing, but then you're tacking that money back on, it seemed. So I just would like to confirm that that is something that we can clarify.
That is my understanding, but I'll ask if those people who are here for that item can answer that question more accurately. If you could raise your hand, Joanne can let you speak. So I don't know if Jake or Mike, one of the mics, can answer that question. Jake.
So to make sure I understand the question, you're asking whether it can be structured so that the
below market rate
does
yeah
not apply.
I don't believe that
below market
does. That's the question, that it won't apply to the below market rates, that this tax will not apply. I believe that's the way it's structured, but we can ask.
We just want to confirm that, yeah, because we had that. We were assuming that when we had the discussion before we were a subcommittee, but we would need to clarify that if that's the case, or if that's something that's worked out with CMFA, when the projects come along.
So, Jake, can you hear us?
Yeah, good evening, council members. And that is an issue that can be addressed when we go to draft the RMA. On several of the projects we have done it where affordable housing units have been excluded from the tax, but then in other instances, there have been the case where we structure the special tax so it's lower for those property types. So there's a couple of ways to address, the concerns there, and we really address it when we start drafting the RMA. And we walk through all the different property types. The special tax is usually based on the lot size or unit size. So if we have affordable housing, units that are smaller, then you could consider it that special tax might be lower. But in some other instances as well, the local agency has requested that those affordable housing units be excluded from the special tax.
Thank you. So just to follow that up, that means when is the RMA determined? Is it per project then, or is that, you know, per our agreement in joining the CFMA?
So the RMA process will kick off during the CFD formation process.
Okay.
And the way that generally works is that we work with the developer, and right, if City of Lafayette has a cap of that 1.8%, we'll work directly with the developer to come up with the proposed tax rates for the different property classifications. And based on that, we'll run sensitivities with the developer to target, the certain amount of capital that the developer is looking to raise. So based on those analyses, when we're working with the developer and the special tax consultant, we will, look at what different tax rates can generate in terms of proceeds. And then what usually happens, right, to, make housing more affordable or, fall within the local agency's requirements for that 1.8% is that will either increase or decrease the tax rates, to get to a point where the developer, is happy with the amount of proceeds that can be raised and it's, financially feasible to move with the project. And on the flip side of that is that the tax rates are also meeting the local agency's goals and policies.
Okay, because that is our intent to focus multifamily and particularly hopefully more affordable homes and use this as a tool to do so. Thank you.
Okay, but just to, what this is doing is setting a maximum. So is the implication then that we negotiate when the developer comes for any particular project, the developer will make a proposal, or are we going to, on a case-by-case basis, say we think the tax should not apply to affordable units because of the type of affordable unit that's in the.
And that's what I'm kind of can clarify, if we would do that on the project by project basis, or is it as the rates, the RMA is calculated, and is that done before the project by project analysis or?
The RMAs are drafted on a project by project
Project by
basis.
project.
Yeah,
okay.
it's not
No
one general
standard.
template across, or it's not usually one general template across all projects, as it's, the tax rates are really looked at on a project by project basis. And that's usually done with the developer and the special tax consultant that look at, comparable tax rates against, different property classifications to actually derive something that will be palatable to the homeowners.
Okay.
Okay, so an eligibility requirement, I mean, if we wanted to take the position that we're only going to allow this if a developer doesn't apply the taxes to its affordable units, then we'd put that in as an eligibility requirement. But if we want to be more flexible, then we just leave this as it is and we deal with it on a case-by-case basis with the understanding that, in some cases that may be something that
Yes.
we would want, and city staff will be on the alert for that when the developer comes.
Yes, and we definitely wanted to keep the flexibility in. I guess what I want to do is make sure that we're saying, yes, we do want to, as much as this is a tool, it also is a tool for those residents for affordability. If they're going to be taxed at a higher rate, it's something we want to consider and hopefully discuss when those projects are coming to us. I know, just to remember to make sure that's part of our discussion on a project by project basis, to make it just as affordable to the residents as much as we're lowering the cost for the developers.
Okay, are there any comments on these amendments before we get any broader discussion? Okay, Councilmember Garrett.
I actually have a question, and I started to ask it, but I thought, no, this makes sense, and I understand it, and others will be able to. But on the legal description of the 1.8% cap and Councilmember Kwok's description that includes the 1% property tax and any other assessments. And so that would include any current at the time of sale, school measures, bonds, parcel tax, any other special agency. Do we have a sense right now what that percentage is? And I might be getting a little bit in the weeds, but as you know, somebody who knows that our schools very much depend on those assessments, I want to make sure that that cap is not precluding, not prohibiting going forward, either continuing those or increasing them as they have over the years. So I just would like clarification.
Well, I haven't done an analysis, but recently, and it depends, obviously, each house is different and assessed differently, but we believe it's roughly 1.2% right now.
Okay, and the way I read the what was read, the schools could adopt another 1%, and that's fine. It doesn't block anything that happens after the date of sale.
Correct. And I just also want to let you know that, we have two people, Mike Whipple and Mike Howell. They raised their hands. They're part of, I believe, Mike, one of them is a developer. They have something to say, so.
Okay.
Who would you like first? Mayor, who would you like to hear from first?
Well, I'll let them decide because
Let's bring in Mike Whipple.
And then I do have a question on that affordability part. But
Mr. Whipple, we've given you permission to speak.
let me ask the city attorney, do we need to reopen the public hearing at this point?
I would, given that you're not actually asking any questions, I would suggest reopening the public hearing.
Okay, and do we need a vote to do that?
No, I think you, Mayor,
Okay,
can do.
public hearing is open.
Mr. Whipple, you're free to speak.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, Mike Whipple here with DFA, working with the developer for Lafayette Lane. I guess as it relates to the current project, Lafayette Lane, and the affordable housing component, I'll address that. The affordable housing is on a separate parcel and will not be within the boundary of the CFD and will not be taxed. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of comfort moving forward on that project. As it relates to the overall tax burdens for what we are proposing with Lafayette Lane is we're proposing total tax rates that would include the future bold CFD that will be around 1.5 to 1.6. So well within that 1.8 threshold that you're talking about. And I think in our preliminary calculations, what we are looking at from the current ad valorem, which is your 1% plus your general obligation bonds for school districts and other taxing districts, we were right there around 1.1 to 1.2% as well. So hopefully that addresses some of those questions and concerns.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Whipple?
Can I just confirm, Mr. Whipple? Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
You're saying 1.6 and you're including like what percentage of tax are you projecting on the special parcel district as part of that 1.6? Or are you saying 1.6 in addition?
The 1.6 is inclusive of everything. So
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
I just want to
inclusive of
confirm that.
everything. Yeah, definitely understand. Yeah, so it's the current taxes that you would see from an ad valorem perspective, which is about 1.1 to 1.2. Any existing maintenance districts or maintenance districts we think that would show up in the conditions of approval, plus then the new proposed bold CFD to finance fees and infrastructure, all that together comes up to about 1.5 to 1.6%.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions from Mr. Whipple? No. Okay, thank you very much.
Would you like to hear from Mr. Howell at this point?
Yes.
Mr. Howell, you've been allowed to speak. Please unmute yourself.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having the meeting tonight and putting this all together. It's very helpful, and we're excited that hopefully the project can go forward. I just wanted to clarify, and Mike Whipple did a good job, that the affordable portion of this project that we are sponsoring, the bold initiative for the town and using Lafayette Lane as an example, but obviously you guys are trying to figure out how to use it for the entire city. Is that it doesn't really work very well for rental housing. I'm just going to put that out there because the tax is increased to the owner of the property, and they end up paying a higher tax, right, to pass it back through in rent. So I'm just kind of clarifying that we are using this only for our for sale units. So you might want to kind of clarify that for yourselves, in that you're going to have projects, for sale projects, not our project, but other for sale projects that will have, percentage of affordable housing that will be for sale a certain price, right? So you might want to just kind of clarify that, but I think that helps a little bit. And yeah, I think I calculated the city was at like 1.3% now with all of the taxes, at least for our project, and that we had added 0.2%, and that includes both city and our expected. We're going to expect that to reach out to both the school district and some of the utility districts, and we had included that in our percentage. And then assuming that we were able to get that, we were at the 1.5, 1.6, but there's a good chance that we are going to be lower than that because of just, the city fees, and potentially the school district would be less. Just want to clarify.
Okay, thank you. When you say we should clarify, what exactly should be clarified?
I'm just trying to point out how it's different for a for sale versus a rental project. Our
No,
project,
we understand. Well, I understand that, but
Yeah.
what would we clarify in the language we have in front of us?
I don't know, because I don't know how many apartment developers are going to go ahead and finance that so they can pay a higher tax rate later. Because it kind of changes the pro forma and the financial capacity. I just don't see it used much in multifamily. Maybe Mike Whipple and the other gentleman can talk a bit more about that. But specifically for our project, we're not going to be doing any taxing of affordable, and our affordable is rental anyway. We've looked at Miramar Group, who I work for, to look at some of the tax issues with other cities and other projects they have as far as doing that. And we've chosen not to do that because of the higher taxes that are passed back to the developer. That
Okay, so is the comment related to areas in zones that allow for multifamily use? Is that what that it's?
Yes, yeah.
Condominiums are multifamily development.
They are, but I'm thinking rental versus for sale. There's a big difference there.
Okay, I think what he's saying, you can't spread that tax around to be paid back because it's one owner. Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
wondering why we need to put something here.
I'm not sure you have to. I'm just giving you the perspective from an apartment developer of why they would never do that.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want to make sure if you're doing it to spur housing, affordable housing, you're going to have some affordable for sale units that make sense that for that program. But affordable rental units, I'm just not sure that works well for that program.
Mike, let me ask you a question. If we're keeping it flexible enough though, so as these projects come up, that there may be other offsets in terms of, the flexibility. Like there's still going to be impact fees that might need to be covered regardless of one over multiple owners of the property. So this would still allow for that, it seems.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, it's at the discretion of the developer or the property owner how they want to attack that, but it does allow flexibility. I was just making a point that it may not apply very well to the rental portion of affordable.
Off the bat. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. All right, so we will close the public hearing, bring it back to the council for further comments. Are you ready to go to?
I have an amendment from the city attorney. If you're taking that, this would be in section 3 of, I think it's 2270. So just to clarify, we believe at this point that we want the council to be able to make the final approval on these and not staff. So third line down, the form of such agreement will be subject to approval by the city council instead of appropriate staff of the city. And then after Exhibit A, it will say shall meet the requirements for bold financing set forth in Exhibit A hereto, and any other requirements imposed by the city council, which I think gives some maximum flexibility if you decide other things that you want to impose, maybe for specific projects for specific reasons. So if we just want to change section 3 so that the council is the one making the decision.
Yep, that sounds good. Is there any concern with that amendment? We'll accept that.
No, thank you.
Okay, all right, are we ready for a motion? So let me ask the city attorney, the recommendations, there's 3 recommendations, but well, let's just start. Okay, can I have a motion to adopt resolution 2022-69?
I move to adopt. I move.
You got to go on vacation.
Okay, so moved. I okay, let me find it.
Second.
Okay, moved by Vice Mayor Dawson, seconded by Councilmember Squawk, that we adopt resolution 2022-69, approving, authorizing, and directing execution of a joint exercise of powers agreement relating to the California Municipal Authority. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? It's unanimous. So now my question is, can we adopt the resolution with the exhibit?
Yes, as amended, as proposed tonight.
Okay, so we need a motion to adopt resolution 2022-70 as amended, and with exhibit A as amended this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion from Vice Mayor Dawson, seconded by Councilmember Quack. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. All right, thank you very much. Thank you to the gentleman on the line for all your assistance with this. Thanks to Tracy for all her work on this, and thank you to the subcommittee for bringing this home. So, all right, we're on to item 13A, 14 items removed from the consent calendar. Vice Mayor Dawson, you had removed the minutes from the last meeting.
Your microphone.
Yes, in my comment, I'm sorry, I have so many files open. I need to find that one now. It was just to strike a word alone, vintage pipeline alone. There's more vintage pipeline that hasn't been tested. And there's a reference in Michael Dawson's comment to PHMSA, F-I-M-S-A. It's actually P-H-M-S-A. It's the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. That's a good, I'm just guessing at this. It's on the second page. Yes.
The very beginning. So
Sorry, I closed that file and I'm looking for it now. But I believe it's, oh yes, it's on page 3. And the PHMSA reference is in the second paragraph, and the strike of just one word is within the italicized third paragraph. Thank you, Joanne.
okay, and I have one more. I was just going to let it slide, but this is in Councilmember Candel's comments. This is on page 10. This Councilmember Candel said, I know you didn't say this, that's why I'm Councilmember Candel says it looks like NIMBY law and Brannon development attorneys wrote letters. I think it's supposed to be YIMBY law. I haven't seen NIMBY lawyers out there, so. Okay, so we have a motion for approval of the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Candel, seconded by Vice Mayor Dawson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. We're on to council commission reports. Right. Well, I'd like to start out by thanking Suzanne for organizing the mugs celebrating 175 plus years.
Beautiful.
Part of the celebration. And what we would ask is that council members who are liaisons to commissions and committees, if you do attend your commission or committee, if you could bring the mugs and hand them out to the commissioners, committee members, task force members, and thank them for being part of Lafayette's 175 plus years of history and part of history going forward. And if you're not able to go to the meeting, then we'll find an alternate way to do it. Okay, oh, wait.
I have one item.
That's over here.
Well, because everything happens in that other 2-week part of the month. But speaking of 175 plus years of celebration and Community Day, I do want to let the public know and my colleagues, hopefully I'm on the mic this time, that we did extend the call for projects to April 12th. So it was April 7th. We have gotten a lot of great ideas and we'll be putting those together, and then we'll have volunteer opportunities for those projects open on May 1st. But the call for projects has been extended. So if anyone wants to submit that, you can go to info@LafayetteCommunityDay.org and find the RFP. And also I will be reaching out. I saw Jonathan over there going, wait, nobody talked to me. I will be talking to some of the city folks in the next day.
Okay, thank you. Any other Councilmember Kwok?
Sure. It's Happy Earth Month, everybody. It's already April. Earth Day celebrations for Sustainable Lafayette for our community will be on Sunday, April 23rd from 11 o'clock to 2 in the Lafayette Plaza. So welcome the public to attend and join us again for that celebration. In addition, this month is the Contra Costa Zero Waste Challenge that we're challenging Moraga and Orinda, and it became effective on April 4th, last Monday, and every Monday we get an email reminding us some actions to take. So we are into the second week of actions. If you haven't yet signed up to join the challenge, we need every single person in Lafayette in order to beat Moraga and Orinda. And so please check out our website, sign up, and take some positive actions for the planet this month.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The last information we got, we were slightly behind Orinda in terms of people signing up. So we need to, up the game.
Yes.
Okay, anyone else? All right, we're on to 15B. This Saturday will be the final concert for Gold Coast Chamber players. And they've been such an asset to the community that I put together a resolution honoring them. I'm open to any amendments. Oops. This, okay. Then can I have
Did you want to go to public?
Comments or questions? No. Okay, then public comment. Open it for public comment.
Any member of the public that would like to address the council on item 15B, please raise your hand now. Mayor, I see no hands raised.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the council. Have a motion for approval of the proclamation.
So I would be honored to move approval of the proclamation recognizing the Gold Coast Chamber players and Pamela Freund Striplin on their final concert on April 15th.
A second.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Geringer, seconded by Councilmember Kendall. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. So we'll talk about how this will be presented. I'll be discussing with you. Got a plan, but I won't.
Well, I was going to say, it is sold out.
Yeah.
I am a premium subscriber, so I have my ticket, but they often have people who don't come. So if you get on a waiting list, you can potentially do that. So.
All right. City manager's update. Acting city manager. No. Ms. Robbins.
I'll be playing the part of Nirup Srivatsa right now. Um, Says the city of Lafayette would like to invite all to participate in the First Street Rain Garden dedication this Saturday, April 15th from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. The new rain garden is located in downtown Lafayette at the corner of First Street and Golden Gate Way. In addition to treating stormwater runoff, the garden features a pathway and seating area to provide a quiet respite amidst mature trees and new landscaping. Also, engineering staff is completing designs for the summer's capital projects and planning specific projects and scopes for 2024. And they will be sharing that with the council at their first meeting in May. Spring break camp and bunny brunch were a huge success, and staff would like to thank the Lafayette Youth Commission for volunteering at the event. Finally, spring and summer registration is open and many camps and classes are filling up. Residents are encouraged to plan ahead and reserve summer camps soon. Registration information can be found on the city website. That is it.
Okay, any questions?
No, but I want to give a special shout out to Jonathan, and your family for helping at and setting up for the Easter Bunny Brunch. That was very lovely.
Okay, and do we typically ask for public comments or questions on the city? Okay. All right, so we're on to our last item, the closed session, and we don't have public comment here. Shouldn't we call for public comment for? Okay, yeah, we're now asking for public comment on the closed session item, which is a conference with real property negotiators, 3370 Sweet Drive. Is there anyone who has any comment on this item before we go
Any
into closed session?
Any member of the public have any comments on item 16A before the city council goes to closed session? Mayor, there are no hands raised.
Okay, so we'll close the public comment and we will go into closed session. We will return, but I'm not sure when it will be, but we will be back in order to report out. Okay, we're out of closed session and into open session. There is no reportable action. And this meeting is adjourned.
Good night.
Good night.